Mrs. Crummer, roll call, please.
Here.
Mr. Malcolm.
Here.
Mr. McGlinchey.
Here.
Mr. Howard.
Here.
Mr. Parks.
Here.
Mr. Schwartzmeyer.
Here.
Mr. Johnson.
Here.
Mayor Pete.
Here. Residents and taxpayers of the borough are permitted to comment on current matters of concern or agenda items which are before council this evening. If you would like to address council borough this evening, we ask that you please stand at the microphone, give your name, spell your last name, and give your address so you will be properly identified for the minute record. Each speaker will be limited to 5 minutes. As an alternative, written comments can be submitted to the borough prior to noon of the day of the meeting. And we did receive one comment. Should we wait till the Yochus hearing on that?
It depends. Yeah. If anybody signed up for and wants to speak at the public hearing, motion 42568 Wexford, Maine, we'll defer you to then. And if that's a written public comment with respect to it, we can defer that to
Okay. We'll defer
public
that
hearing
too.
as well.
Okay. Good deal. So. Oh, yeah, that is Popovich here, yeah. Okay, we have some other speakers who have signed up. Mr. Thaddeus Popovich. Welcome, Thaddeus, once again. It's been a while.
I have some handouts. There are 12 packets. Thank you for giving me 5 minutes. The same testimony I'm giving you tonight, the Board of Health only gives you 3 minutes. And only you get a chance at it once, and you have to register 24 hours in advance. Otherwise, you're dead meat. Okay. But thank you for the opportunity here. So I'm going to actually read what I wrote down. It's the same thing. My name is Thaddeus Popovich, residing at 1654 Stone Mansion Drive, Franklin Park. Today, I am representing the Justice Ministry of St. Brendan's Episcopal Church, located in the borough of Franklin Park. The Justice Ministry was established to answer God's call by working for equality, justice, and transformation. We support and encourage civic responsibility, the reduction of gun violence, immigration, and for me, most importantly, the stewardship of our earth. The other evening, our ministry agreed that we should continue to be active in developing awareness in climate and environmental issues. Today, I present the council with copies of the world's littlest book on climate, 10 facts in 10 minutes about CO2. It's an easy read. Chautauqua Institution edition. This booklet is part of Chautauqua Institution's climate change initiative, which focuses on education, stewardship, and justice. Please note section 9, more heat fuels wild weather. Think of our recent blizzard conditions in the Buffalo, New York area, and the ongoing atmospheric rivers coming on the Pacific Ocean, creating monster storms in California, just to mention a few. So why bring this up at this meeting? I have included an article which I chose to not print out. I wanted to save trees, called A Wrong Turn for Southwest Pennsylvania. That was published on December 11th, 2022, on the opinion page of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I will send an electronic version of this so you can easier for you to gather it in. Our industries contribute to the tragic climate episodes with emission of greenhouse gases and other pollutants. Half of the region's pollution still comes from industrial plants. Emissions from the Shell plant will add to the already devastating concentration of pollutants in our air and undermine the country's progress making radical climate gains. The Shell plant in Beaver County would be the second highest hazardous air polluter in the state. The plant is estimated to release 2.2 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions in a given year. This doesn't take into account the vast ethane value chain, which I included with you. It's a nice pictorial, as labeled by the DOE, which includes fracking wells, processing plants, fractionators, compressor stations, and pipelines needed to deliver ethane to the Shell polymer plant. Methane, a powerful greenhouse gas, is notorious for leaking at all of these handoff points. Our ministry provided support in preventing Penn Energy Resources from fracking Lidwin Park, and we believe we supported you in voting the right way.
Right.
Penn Energy, I understand, talking to their vice president of land management at the time, already had a contract to supply ethane in the Shell plant. They were really counting on Lidwin Park being fracked. Thank you for the way you voted. We advocacy groups continue to push our policymakers to have the courage to do the right and moral thing. They should stop subsidizing mature private industries that cast burdens on our communities while allowing a narrow few to keep large profits at our expense. Finally, perhaps we should create an oversight climate commission to identify and resolve causes of climate episodes. Thank you. I have extra copies of these. I can leave them in the Borough building. I have 3 boxes. So if anyone wants extras.
Thank you. That is.
Thank you.
Next on the list is Amy Johnson.
Good evening. My name is Amy Johnston. I live at 2560 Alden Drive. My last name is spelled Johnston. I'm here this evening just to express some concerns that I have in regards to the Cardinal Bridge development. I'm not against it. I'm here just to express some questions and some concerns to that development. I'm not a lawyer, so some of the information I present may not be applicable. If it's not, maybe it's for points to ponder. So my first concern in regarding this proposed Cardinal Ridge is the slope and how it's going to affect my property. As it's been stated, my property will be affected, negatively impacted. As the analogy was presented, it will be as if the faucet is set to a slow drip, which will constantly be running into my backyard. That being said, and I just forgot my phone back there, I have to wonder about my yard and the natural ability that it has to dry out. Adding to that, any of the precipitation to my yard and making it a possible swamp over time. As a property owner, it's kind of sad that I won't be able to possibly not enjoy my backyard because of this situation. I have the ordinance on my phone, but in reviewing the Franklin Park ordinance, it fell out of chapter 124. It was for grading and it dealt with 1 to 2 family dwellings. So again, I don't know if it applies, but it talked about a denial permit appeal. And it talked about the borough engineer's opinion in regards to damage to other people's property. And I have to wonder if it was in the opinion of the borough engineer that my property would not be harmed or damaged, especially with the additional saturation and the precipitation from the rainwater. The second one has to do, of course, with my property value. And in the case that my backyard does become damaged or flooded or swamped over time due to the proposed slope, how does that affect my good faith effort and potential sale of my house over time? My third concern or question, and again, I have the ordinance on my phone, which I left back there. But in reviewing Franklin Park ordinance, I didn't see anything in regards to special purpose streets. Now, maybe I missed it, but I was looking for any information in regard to cul-de-sacs. In cross-referencing, I did find something in the Allegheny County ordinance. Now, I don't know how one ordinance for Allegheny County works with Franklin Park, but again, I have the ordinance back there. But it did talk about an ordinance where in Allegheny County with a cul-de-sac could only serve no more than 30 homes in a cul-de-sac and no more than 250 traffic plans per day. So I wonder with the amount of houses that we have on Alden Drive, plus the 26 townhomes going in, if that ordinance is applicable to this development. Again, if it's not applicable, point to ponder. My last concern, of course, is in regards to safety. We're seeing a higher concern for crime here in Franklin Park. A few months back, there was a reported incident on Gantry Court, which is right next to me, about a car trying to pick up a little girl. We are in a very small community, never thought something like that would happen. So with the influx of cars and travel within our own small community, I do worry about the safety. I worry about how it affects our volunteer fire department and the strain that it puts on them with the additional housing plans and development going in, as well as the traffic that it adds to Nicholson Road, as well as the intersection at 910. Those are my concerns. My questions were posed within my concern. Thank you very much for your time. And I don't know if they'll be addressed this evening or not. Thank you.
Well, I think we'll have a presentation from the applicant when we get to that. Just from my notes, I know Allegheny County's ordinance wouldn't apply to the borough. So that one is a quick answer. We do have standards for streets, including cul-de-sacs, and do have the requirement of 26 on a cul-de-sac. My other notes, other ones are general concerns. Any developments, but that was the one that stood out.
Michelle Conley. Let's do. Oh, that's the Yochus.
We're going to take that during the public hearing. Thank you.
Sorry, and Bernie Avon regarding Lori claim. Yeah.
Evening. My name is Bernie Avon. My last name is spelled A-V-O-N. I'm a resident of Franklin Park. I'm a homeowner of 2604 Lorik Lane. The property right next to where Cardinal Ridge will be going in. So that's what I would like to talk about. Few things I wanted to bring up to the council. And, you know, I've attended the planning commissions and I listened to the presentation from Red Rocks and Stephen Victor and Associates. And I was led to believe that the developers are planning to use Lorik Lane as an emergency access point. Is that correct?
I mean, and yes, it's shown on the plans.
Okay. If that is what we're saying, by what authority does he have that would grant him that access to do that?
So in the 2017 Commonwealth Court decision, where it was the denial of the 3 apartment buildings, actually 2 plans. One of the plans did address the first one, access to and through Lorik Lane exclusively, not for emergency or otherwise. And there's portions of the opinion that say, one, that's a private property issue that the borough is not supposed to get into, regardless of use. And two, there was enough evidence, at least even assuming it could have got into that the property owner, because it abuts Lorik Lane, had access rights. And that was for the entire 120 units going through there on the initial plan that was denied for other reasons. But that would be the basis for being able to divert an emergency access.
So it's just from the judge. It's not, there's
That was
no,
from three judges. It was a Commonwealth
but-
Court opinion.
but there was no evidence.
There was in that proceeding for those applications back in 2016 or 2000.
So I have the brief that you're talking about,
The brief or the opinion?
the brief.
Wow.
I don't have the opinion,
Mhm.
but in the brief, I mean, don't the other, the court cases that were cited, I'm sure you know which ones they were because you were the attorney working on it.
Right.
But did they not hold any weight with the judge?
Well, and we're going back in time. So the other issue on the second plan, which didn't use Lorik Lane, was the use of a private driveway.
Right, that was my
on-
next comment.
Okay, I just want, those are the cases that we hit pretty hard in terms of saying that was the reason for the denial of the second plan. And the judges said, no, those cases that deal with secondary access and there is no specific ordinance requirement. So we did amend the ordinance after that decision came down that says you can't use a private driveway to access a use that's not allowed in another zoning district. But this is not a driveway. This is a public street that's being proposed.
But it's being built on a residential lot.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter in the legal opinion.
Not if it's up to street standards. If it's just a general, just like we don't have any requirements. We don't have our map up that, you can't use a public street to go between different zoning districts. If it's of the size, if it's capable of being taken over as a public street, there's no restriction on use for different zoning districts.
So by judge decree order, I'm going to lose private property over this, and so will my neighbors.
Now, I can't talk about that one because that is a private property dispute that the judge says there's another venue, not land development, not approval.
So if the developer gets access to the lane,
Mhm.
would he not also then be on the hook for restitution for all of the expenses that the lane had to be taken care of over the years?
Another private property dispute, that's why it's a private lane, but the interest that they had was because they touched the portion of the laid out street that was never accepted as a public street in the Nicholson Heights plan to have access to that parcel back there and the access at the house on the corner. They had rights, to use that lane according to the Commonwealth.
I guess I ran out of time, so I can't hit these other ones. These
Yep,
other
sorry.
concerns I have, can I talk again later?
Well, we'll see how, after the presentation, and we do have a public hearing to go through, so we'll see how.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other citizens who want to comment, other than on the Yochus situation? Okay. The minutes of the December 21, 2022 pre-meeting, the December 21, 2022 regular meeting, and the January 4th, 2023 work session were given to council and mayor. Are there any additions or corrections? Do we have a motion?
Move the minutes of the December 21st, 2022 pre-meeting, the December 21st, 2022 regular meeting, and the January 4th, 2023 work session be approved.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Treasurer's report, Mrs. Crane.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I just want to point out that this is an interim report that I submitted for the December financials. Since it's year end, we still are making year end adjustments and we'll still have an audit. So there will be an updated set of 12/31 financials when everything is said and done in a couple months. The interim report as of now, the general fund revenues for the month of December totaled $737,203. Year-to-date total revenues were $11,062,537.25, which represents 106% of the 2022 total budget. Conversely, general fund expenditures for the month of December totaled $754,912. Year-to-date expenditures were $11,227,756, which represents 92% of the 2022 total budget. I would also like to point out that in the report that I originally submitted, there was a formula error in the cash position of the current month unrestricted cash balance. The correct balance should have been $3,353,575 versus the original report predicted a cash balance of $3,828,093. That concludes my report.
Thank you.
Move the December treasurer's financial report be accepted as read.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Police report, Mayor O'Keefe.
Yes, Mr. President, for the month of December, the Franklin Park Police had 583 service calls, resulting in 14 arrests, 4 retail theft, 4 disorderly conduct, 1 DUI, 2 harassment, 1 aggravated assault, 1 endangering the welfare, and 1 drugs. 169 warnings were issued and 60 citations were issued. We responded to 1 special response team called out by Ross Township. On December 15th, Officer Brittany Smith participated in the Veterans Holiday event at the VA hospital in Pittsburgh. And over Christmas, the police department received numerous gifts of candy, cookies, and fruit baskets. And Ray Don's Body Works brought in lunch on December 19th and the 22nd. Primrose School brought in lunch on December 21st. And a $150 donation was received from Mr. Pakolak of Elk Ridge Drive. And finally, with sympathy and prayer, the killing of Brackenridge Police Chief Justin McIntyre on January 2nd was devastating. The Franklin Park Police and other nearby police departments provided 10-day police coverage for Brackenridge Borough to enable the Brackenridge Police to mourn the loss of their chief. And Franklin Park Police were present at Chief McIntyre's funeral on Wednesday, January the 11th. And that completes my police report, Mr. President.
Recommend the police report be filed with the police secretary.
Fire report, Mr. Mizlinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. In December, the fire company responded to 32 calls. 10 dispatched and canceled en route, 4 fire alarm activations with no fires, 4 vehicle accidents with general cleanup, 3 power lines down, 2 building fires, 2 carbon monoxide incidents, 1 natural gas leak, 1 severe weather incident, 1 sprinkler system activation, 1 vehicle fire, 1 water condition, 1 gasoline or flammable liquid spill, 1 vehicle accident with victim extrication. We were assisted by other fire companies 0 times, and we assisted other fire companies 3 times. For the month of December, we expended 690 volunteer man hours. Year to date for 2022, 5,661 volunteer man hours. End of report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Mizlinski. Building inspectors report, Mr. Phillips.
Mr. President, construction report for December 2022. 12 permits were issued for the month, 1 single family dwelling, 1 commercial remodel, 1 deck, fence, 2 swimming pools, 6 miscellaneous permits. Total value of construction for the month was $1,518,914. Total fees collected for the month were $13,630. End of report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. The Borough Council had held an executive session on January 4th, 2023 to discuss a personnel matter. The Borough Council also held an executive session this evening to deal with potential litigation
Quasi judicial deliberations for the Yochus
and quasi judicial
deliberations.
deliberations for the Yochus hearing. Okay, we got that. Old business, none. New business. We have motion, please.
Move council authorize the payment of the bills which have been reviewed and approved since the last meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Yunker, could you institute the public hearing process, please?
Certainly, we'll now go on the record. Borough Council of the Borough of Franklin Park will now hold a public hearing on a conditional use application submitted by David Yochus for a property located at 2568 Wexford Main Road in the R4 zoning district. Assessment records show that the property is approximately 1.9 acres. It is currently developed with an uninhabited, unfinished 2-story structure of 13,000 square feet. The application is for a quote, medical office as defined in the zoning ordinance, and the intent is to finish the interior of the existing structure to accommodate offices for physicians, dentists, or medical personnel for treatment and examination of patients solely on an outpatient basis with no overnight patients. A separate land development application and approval will be required for this non-residential use. This is application number CU 22-12-05. It is block and lot number 1345-P-84. The applicable zoning provision is in section 212, attachment 1D, table 4.4A. Medical office be allowed as a conditional use in the R4 zoning district. I have a number of preliminary exhibits to enter into the record before we hear from the applicant and also see if anybody who is signed up or otherwise here in the audience wishes to gain party status to participate in the hearing and be involved in any litigation or appeals coming therefrom. The preliminary exhibits that I have, and I do have a copy for our court reporter as well as for the applicant, are as follows. Borough Exhibit A is the application for conditional use received November 3rd, 2022. Borough Exhibit B is the text of section 212-202 defining the medical office / clinic use. Borough Exhibit C is the text of section 212, table 4.4, allowing medical office use as a conditional use in the R4 district. Borough Exhibit D is the text of section 212-1803, general conditional use criteria. Borough Exhibit E is the public hearing proof of publication from December 29th, 2002 and January 5th, 2023. Borough Exhibit F is a picture of the posting of the property occurring at least a week in advance of tonight's public hearing. Borough Exhibit G are letters to neighboring property owners regarding tonight's public hearing. Borough Exhibit H is the notice to the applicant regarding the Planning Commission's review and recommendation at their December meeting. Borough Exhibit I is the written consent to an extension of time to commence the public hearing this evening. I do have copies I'll distribute when the time comes. Before we hear from the applicant and we swear in witnesses, it is customary for us to see if anybody who either lives in close proximity or has another interest in this matter here tonight wishes to seek party status, meaning you would be sworn in as a witness. You'd be able to ask questions of the applicant. You'd be able to testify in opposition or in support of the application, and you would be subject to cross-examination as well. This is a requirement if you are desired to have substantive standing and participate in any litigation over an appeal, depending on the outcome of the hearing this evening. At this point, you can also, if you don't want to become a party, but you do want to provide public comment, as people have signed up, you may instead defer to the end of the public hearing to provide your public comment, but you will not be participating as a party. With that said, is there anybody who wishes to be a party to this public hearing aside from the applicant? Please come up to the microphone. And you will have an opportunity to, oh, there we go. Yes, you can, but first and foremost, to establish who are the parties, this is the time to do so. So if you would like to do that, please rise and give your name and address.
Frank Uzi, 2566 B is in boy. Westford Bay Road.
Okay. And you're seeking party status in this matter?
I'm against
Okay, I'll take that as a yes. Any questions, Mr. Loeb, as to Frank's status as a potential party? Okay. All right, thank you. Anyone else? Brown? Okay, and you are also in close proximity to the property? Okay, and do you wish to have party status in the hearing tonight? Certainly, that means you can ask any questions of the applicant. You can put on any testimony that you want. You can cross-examine. You can be cross-examined, and you can participate in any appeals from a decision this evening. Yes? Okay. Any objection, Mr. Loeb? There we go. Anyone else? And once again, you will be able to give a public comment at the end of the hearing. You just won't be able to participate in asking direct questions to the applicant. Okay, ma'am? And you are also in close proximity to the property at issue? 2 houses down, okay. And you wish to become a party to this public hearing? Mr. Lope, any objections? I saw one more hand in the back. Whoop, 2 perhaps. Please stand and state your name and address. Oh, you gotta speak a little louder, or you could come up to the microphone if oh, at the very end, rather than as a party? Or as a party. And you don't have to, once again, if you are a party, you don't have to ask any questions. You don't have to necessarily testify, but we just want to make sure that we have the people that are involved other than the applicant noticed and involved. Thank you. One more, yes? Also in close proximity? Okay, and you do wish to become a party to tonight's public hearing? Okay, any objection, Mr. Lowe? Okay. All right, thank you all. At this point, before we hear from the applicant, I would ask anybody that will give testimony in this matter to please rise and we'll swear in the witnesses.
Could you raise your hand? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you give to the Cardinal being heard shall be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, and so that it will be plans to God on that last birthday?
Thank you all for that and those preliminary matters. At this time, we will turn the podium and the microphone over to the applicant, who will be entitled to give a presentation as to what they intend to do with this conditional use. Once that presentation is done, We'll open the floor to parties to ask additional questions. We'll go in the order in which you identified yourself. At the close of their hearing, you'll have the opportunity to give your testimony directly to council. And as we went over before, we have a couple of options tonight. We can either continue tonight's public hearing until next month if there are still outstanding items and matters to be addressed. We can close the public hearing tonight and have a vote as written forth in the agenda. We can also close the public hearing tonight if everything is done, and council can table action on this matter until the next meeting because we have 45 days from the close of a public hearing to render a decision. So that's the basic outline of what we'll hear tonight. At this point, I'll turn the floor over to the applicant, ask you to introduce yourself and state your name for the court reporter.
My name is Stephen Victor, Victor, from Victor Wetzel Associates, for the landscape architects, land planners for the project. I'm also here joined tonight by David Yochus, the property owner, and Phil Lope, our legal counsel. I have a series of slides to introduce the project to the council and for purposes of the public hearing, to put into testimony the relevant information for the conditional use. This is a copy of, on the wall here, is a copy of the township zoning map in the northwesterly corner of the township along Wexford Bain Road. Rustic Ridge is here, and the subject site is here in the red, which is in the R4 zoning district. Next slide. When we zoom in closer, again, we can see the location of the property right here. You can see that between this property and the residential R1 area, there is another piece of property here that is also R4. So we have the subject property here is surrounded on all four sides by existing R4 zoning uses. Next slide. This is a list of all the permitted and conditional uses within the R4 zoning district. Again, just I won't go through the record and just read them all, but you can see the a fair number of permitted uses within the R4 zoning district. And then there is a more extensive list of conditional uses. I've highlighted in red the medical office. That is our application to have a medical office facility to be located as a conditional use in the site. And we'll be demonstrating tonight how we comply with the conditions, both general and specific, for a medical office application. Next slide. This is a photograph taken looking eastward on Wexford Bain Road. So here is our driveway just off on the right-hand side. This is to the south. And so you can see coming out of the location of the existing driveway, which will also be the location of the proposed driveway, that we have excellent sight distances looking toward the east. Next slide. We also have excellent sight distances in the opposite direction, looking to the west. This property in Wexford Bain Road is a state highway, and so the ultimate permitting for this will be through PennDOT through a highway occupancy permit. Next slide. If we were standing on Wexford Bain Run, looking at the site, this is the existing building that's there. The history on this was that it was originally to have been one single family structure. The individual who wanted to do that decided not to build it, and it sat for many years with just some plastic wrap on it. Mr. Yochus did go in and put a more permanent siding on the property for insulation purposes, but this certainly will not be the ultimate look on this when we come back through land development. If we receive the conditional use approval, we will show you architectural renderings of how the exterior will be improved. But our intent is to use that existing building for the medical office facility. Next. Our conditional use site plan here in blue is the existing building located on the rectangular site here along Wexford Bain. Our driveway located here would take you into a parking lot in the front of the building. And this would be for patient parking. There is then a driveway that goes around the back of the building. And that driveway also drops down and goes into the basement area. And so there's the opportunity for some staff garage parking underneath the building in the basement area, but also additional parking here in the back for staff parking. So, and there is a rear entrance for staff purposes, and the off of the public parking in the front would be the main access into the building here where the existing front door is. The building is approximately 13,000 square feet on 2 stories. So this is not a large facility as we think in terms of medical offices. This would just be small private office facilities. This is not going to be a Allegheny Health Networks type facility. The next slide. As part of our application, we have identified where you would have existing vegetation here on the southwesterly and southeasterly portions of the site, where you have existing vegetation that will remain. But we have also shown how the additional buffering requirements can be accommodated along both the east, west, and southerly portion of the site, so that when we come back through for land development, we will detail this out with specific plant selections, but just wanted to, at this conditional use level, to identify that we recognize that there will be buffering requirements. Likewise, we have identified a storm detention facility here to handle the runoff in the back portion of the site, and the front portion of the site would be an underground facility, all of which the drainage would lead out to the PennDOT storm sewer system and be connected into it. Again, that detail would come about at the time of the land development application following conditional use approval. Next slide. In response to the bulk and area requirements, the borough does not set specific bulk and area standards for the non-residential uses, medical office in the R4. Therefore, the code says we are to use the residential standards set up in the zoning ordinance 212-1305 B parentheses 1 parentheses D, in which the front yard setback, this would be off of Wexford Bain, would be 25 feet. The side yard setback would be 10 feet, and the rear yard setback would be 20 feet. These are setbacks relative to the building. And as you can see, we've set well within the site, so we have no problem at all complying with any of these standards. Next. In response to the general conditional use standards, we would state that the Wexford Bain neighborhood is a mix of residential and non-residential uses, such as church, office, medical office, convenience stores, hotels, townhouses, nursing homes, and single family. This proposed medical office will not change the character of this mixed use neighborhood. Number 2, medical office building will not endanger the public health, safety, morals, comfort, or welfare of the borough. Number 3, the proposed use will comply with the borough's codes and regulations. Again, we'll be proving many of those details at the time of the land development application. Failing to meet those code requirements would therefore nullify any conditional approval that we would be granted. Number 4, medical office building will not generate air or water pollution, noise, nor restrict natural light and air circulation. The lighting for the parking lot will be shielded and be dark sky compliant, meaning it will be a downward lighting facility, not a large globe that lights the whole neighborhood. Therefore, this use will not endanger or impair the surrounding homes. Next. Conditional general standard number 5, the topography, soils, and size of the property are compatible with the proposed medical office building and parking. Number 6, access from the Wexford Bain Road, which can easily accommodate the traffic generated by the medical office. 52 parking spaces have been provided per the code requirement. Code has a standard for the number of parking spaces for a building of this size for medical use, and that's 52. And we have demonstrated through our site plan that we can meet that. Number 7, site currently has a septic system, but an alternative public sewer connection is proposed. And how we would make that connection is we would go out to Wexford Bain Road, go to the west down to Rustic Ridge, go in the Rustic Ridge right of way to an existing septic system along the Rustic Ridge area. Water and other utilities are currently available on Wexford Bain Road, and no solid or toxic waste will be generated by this use. Medical waste disposal will be provided by a licensed operator. Now, I want to clarify for this, we are not doing any, major surgeries or other licensed facilities. But if you go to the doctor's office and you get a shot, they take your syringe and they put it in a little red box, and then somebody comes and picks up that little red box. That's sort of the level of medical waste that we would be dealing with here. Number 8, landscaping will be provided around the perimeter and the perimeter of the site and the building, as we have demonstrated in our conceptual plan. Number 9, the borough is in the process of preparing a new comprehensive plan. This property is on the fringe of the proposed interstate concept area. Therefore, the proposed medical office is complementary with the proposed new comprehensive plan. Next. Now, the following is from section 212 of the zoning ordinance, subsection 1305, in which we now deal with the specific standards for a medical office building in the R4 district. 1, that the existing structure is set back further than the required R4 standards. So again, I quoted those earlier with the front, side, and rear, and the existing building that we'll be renovating all falls well within those allowable setback standards. Number 2, that no parking is proposed in the front yard setback area. We've held that back away from Wexford Bain Road. Landscaping shall be provided along the 10-foot side yard and 20-foot rear yard. Provide a 60% screening at a 5-foot height. And that's a specific code requirement that we recognize and will achieve. Parking areas will be screened by a wooden fence. The existing structure will maintain its residential character and 2-story height. Parking lot lighting will use cutoff fixtures and follow dark sky guidelines. And because the site abuts residential uses on all 4 sides, although they're not zoned, they're zoned for R4 mixed uses, but they are currently residential uses, it is not possible to have a loading space that, by your ordinance, cannot face a residential use. Therefore, no loading space is proposed, as large deliveries are not expected for this use anyway. And lastly, refuse bins will be located in the front parking lot, which is the easiest access for collection. Collection would occur between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. and bins will be screened by a masonry enclosure. Next slide. And that particular, now my laser goes, there we go. Thank you. We've set the enclosure here. So again, a garbage truck come in, come around, pull up, gather, and then turn around and leave in that fashion. We believe that we have met all of the standards based on the recommendation from your planning commission and your borough engineer. There was a condition that was placed that we would be timely in a follow-up application, and we have, as recommended by your planning commission, and we agree to follow that as well. Do you have any questions of me? If not, let others speak.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Victor. We'll start with the Borough Council members to my left. If there are any questions regarding the application for this proposed use. We'll start with Uday.
Thank you for the presentation and information. Just real quick, in a couple of slides before this, you had mentioned the proposed sewage route is through the Rustic Ridge right away. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Is there any kind of map that kind of, you could use your laser pointer to
I can
kind
use
of
my-
guide me or?
Yeah. For some reason, my battery. Won't hold. There we go.
There's one here.
Here's the current septic system located back here. We're putting detention facility on top of it, so it could not be used for that. And so the intention is to use a grinder pump, and we would pump out to the Wexford Run Road right away, follow down the Wexford Run Road right away, and then go down the westerly side of Rustic Ridge. I believe the sanitary manhole is somewhere in this area. It serves this existing first single family house on the right. So somewhere in this area. So it would be that, if you would, U-shaped alignment for there. Obviously, it will require a highway occupancy permit to run through the state road right away, and through the land development process, we would receive the borough's permission to utilize the public road right of way here on Rustic Ridge.
Okay, so that's so that you don't have to go through your detention facility, is that the reason? or-
That detention is stormwater.
Okay,
You're asking about sanitary sewers?
oh, yeah, that's right.
That was, so it was simply the sanitary sewer.
Okay, so would this go through a yard or through the road? Like, I'm not familiar with how these work, so
Sure.
if
It's
you could explain.
a grinder pump is basically an oversized garbage disposal. And it grinds all sewage effluent and then spits it into, probably in this case, about a 1.5 to 2 inch diameter pipe. So it's pressurized, and it basically just pushes it up, down, and into the existing sanitary sewer. So instead of a gravity flow system, that we would be using a pressurized system instead. It's perfectly acceptable. It's used all the time.
Okay. Is there a line that exists on Wexford Bain?
There are no sewers on Wexford Bain. I wish there were.
So you would have to construct the line along the road through 20/66 A and B, right? So-
No, we're not going, we're going through road right of ways. We'll stay within, along front of those properties that you talked about here. But no, we're not going into anybody's property. It's in the road right of way.
I think I'm good on the sewer part. So it's a medical office. That's what you proposed, right?
Yes, sir.
Is there a market need? I'm just curious, is there a market need for this? Because from what I understand, or someone has pointed out, there are several medical offices around the area that are vacant. So why a medical office?
We have tenants lined up to come in here, and they're wanting to be in here because it's a type of practice that they would like to have a small building to be within. So it's a type of building that is specific for that type of practice.
Good for now.
Thank you, Mr. Malkin.
No question.
Mr. Parks?
Yes, I'm curious about the timeline. If this was approved, given the current condition of the building itself and the property, how long do you estimate it would take to go through all the various required approvals and then to perform the construction and rehabilitation of a building that's been sitting there for 20 years? With that estimate, what are your plans between now and the completion of it?
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, if I state this wrong, Mr. Junker, or, well, but that our obligation is that within 6 months of the approval of the conditional use, we must make a land development application. So if granted the conditional use approval, we would immediately engage an architect to work on the plans as necessary for us to move forward with a land development application. We would also be working with a civil engineer to determine stormwater and the utility interconnections. And then our firm would be working on doing the site plan portion of it. So we think that that's a tight but a reasonable time frame to make that application. I would anticipate that going through your EAC, Planning Commission, and Borough Council approval would probably be another 4 months. On top of that, we would need a NPDES permit from the department from Allegheny County Conservation District. And I would probably want to tack on 2 additional months to the 4 months for the borough. And therefore, we're now out 12 months, in which we could then begin construction, because what we would be anticipating is during the 2 months after your approval, we would be submitting construction plans. I guess we don't have to submit the construction plans because we can build the site, but then, we'd probably submit the construction plans as well. So I would hope that site construction for this work would be beginning in approximately 12 months. Again, depending upon the speed for those various reviewing agencies. And that I would say it would not be unusual to think that it would be at least 12 months to do the final retrofit and finish the building out. So from the date of your approval, we would hopefully have tenants in there within 24 months.
So for 2 years, it's going to be sitting there as it is.
No, I would say for 18 months, it's going to be sitting there as is. In the last 6 months, it will be under construction. So now we can put the, finished exterior skin on it, windows, doors, etc. So we would be into that process. If there was a faster process, we'd be happy to take it because our tenants are there wanting to move forward on this. So it will not be for lack of tenants that we would not be moving forward.
No further questions.
Thank you. And Mr. Park's question did have me look at Mr. Phillips' staff report dated January 6th, 2023. It is referenced in the motion, but for purposes of the record, we'll identify as Borough Exhibit J, the staff report, and the provision in there as recommended by the Planning Commission would be a condition of approval that a preliminary and final land development application must be submitted along with engineered plans in accordance with section 184 subdivision and land development as necessary for the proposed site improvements within 180 days of this conditional use approval. So that was about what Mr. Victor related. There are provisions in the borough zoning ordinance regarding the expiration of a conditional use, generally 1 year or so, if there is not a building permit or occupancy permit applied for and granted. That would also be a motivation to continue moving. And I think one more point is sort of elephant in the room with this building that is 20 years old. It is subject to a borough condemnation order due to lack of progress that has been upheld by the Building Code Board of Appeals here at the borough and is under appeal in front of the Court of Common Pleas, and as involved, or at least was part of the motivation to have this application come forward with some definitive plans for this property that I think everybody in the room and parties have recognized that has sat vacant for 20 years, give or take at this point. Okay.
Yes, Mr. Victor, I believe, and Mr. Junker, please correct me if I'm wrong, that for this conditional use application, we should have had some kind of plans for the building to go along with that.
Yeah, I'll defer to Tim. I mean, and it is confusing. We often like to have conditional use applications with land development applications. It's not a requirement, but as we can see, we're talking about some land development type issues when the focus of this hearing, needs to be not so much on the building as it is, the history of the building, but how it will operate as a medical use and a medical office as per the zoning code. And I don't know, Tim, in terms of requirements, we know we have sort of the zoning site plan. Are there other issues or considerations that you see in applications for conditional use?
The application for conditional use section, it does require building plans, conceptual building.
Just conceptual, not,
That is part of my staff report. Since we got the submission.
Since,
That would be a condition that, however you decide to want to.
right, if we did give you, say, if we decided to continue it to our next meeting, which I believe is February 16th, would that give you enough time to put that together? Sure. Sure.
Lope, I'm an attorney and I represent Dave Yochus. Our thinking was before we spent all the money that we would have to spend on stormwater drawings, and there are 54 different items that should be covered in your land development application. Before we spent all the money on that, we wanted to be sure that we would have conditional use approval. And the conditional use approval process with this public hearing, perfect vehicle to determine that. I mean, that's why we're here. If we find that we get that conditional use approval, then Mr. Yochus can move forward with the stormwater drawings, the building plans, all of the landscaping, all of that that's involved. But he didn't want to make, and it makes sense to me that he wouldn't make that big financial commitment without knowing that he first could go forward with these. And that's this conditional use approval process, and the public hearings, the vehicle to resolve that.
and I will agree in terms of when we're talking about zoning and the use here, that all those other criteria with respect to, the stormwater and even sanitary and the layout of the parking lot and everything else. I'm just looking at, Tim, your staff report references a section of the, it looks like 212-1802B 4D. I'm trying to get to that exact language. 1802. And no, I don't think anybody's looking for building permit level plans. And I think, Luke, you're talking more just about what does this look like from the street if it becomes a medical office, maybe some preliminary signage or anything like that.
Yeah, I think you can call it conceptual building plans. I think that's really what we're looking for. It may help to put some minds at ease too, I think.
Is section 1802? I should ask, that 1802 is in the zoning ordinance?
Yes.
And what is it? What subsection is that under 1802? What is the?
All applications for conditional use approval shall contain the following: a development plan as defined by this chapter, zoning chapter, a legal document verifying applicant's legal interest in the subject property, deed, sale agreement, lease. C, the application fee was important. And the amount sent by the resolution of Borough Council, and construction plans where renovations or modifications of an existing building is immediately contemplated, showing the scope, nature, and extent of said renovation or modification. So construction plans, doesn't say building plans or UCC or anything else, but it is at least a requirement of,
That's an application content.
application
That
content.
should have been, that's the application content that should have been submitted with the application.
Or presented tonight. If we had a slide here that showed, something, a street level
Well, if we were-
conceptual.
Max, if we were
Mhm.
told that, we could have done that. I mean, we appeared in front of the planning commission.
Well, you were told that because I gave my staff report several weeks ago to you guys, so.
You didn't raise this at the planning.
No, I didn't, but I mean,
This is the first time we are hearing.
that was part of my staff report also at the planning commission. It just, since the planning commission didn't pick up on that, That's why I actually quoted chapter and verse in my report.
You never verbalized that.
No, because this is beyond me now. This is a conditional use process. I'm not, I'm just bringing it up. Laying it out.
It is being brought up, but it's being brought up verbally for the first time. And if we were deficient in that, it wasn't pointed out that we were deficient by either you or the engineer's review letters. So if that seems to be a sticking point, then obviously that's something that we would need to put together.
No, I mean, in terms of, I mean, it's right there in the ordinance itself in terms of what's required in the application. And if Tim had it in a staff report, I mean, no, it maybe not came up, and I don't know. I wasn't at the planning commission. Were there any things shown?
Accepted the application.
No, no, no. He,
Administratively complete, it shouldn't have been accepted.
I think he's
And we
saying
would've-
it's
we would've
administrative.
addressed it At that point.
Right. We have a section on that are when they are not administratively complete, and that is a whole other process that just doesn't start the timelines. We don't have to worry about a deemed approval or anything, but in terms of, you know, a question and a provision here, and if it is, at least in terms of an interest to see what this may look like other than from the bird's eye view, that might be a matter to throw together. And I won't say, no, it does not need to be a land development plan. It does not need to be building code compliant for everything, but you know, construction plans, and I scrolled up from where the language was, is enough to at least show what this is going to look like in the context of the neighborhood there.
And finally, Mr. Victor, I did have another comment. It's more of a comment than a question. In terms of the siding, colloquially, I believe this house was known for years as the Tyvek house. And when we started the process with the building code board of appeals, it was in that condition. The green board was put on, but I want to make sure that the record reflects that was not a permitted activity. So we have to talk about that or look into that, but that's not something that should have happened the way that it did.
Okay.
Okay,
I understand that.
thank you.
Dr. Lee?
If my understanding is correct, this is just this building and this office is for the daytime use, right? It's just there won't be any overnight procedure or something like that. The patient would stay like in the building for overnight, right?
That is correct.
So do you have plan like about the, like for example, like how much traffic will be brought up to that site, and when you build this building, so how much traffic? Because I live in this area, and actually traffic and right now is really it's really bad, and we have a very crowded and place. So what kind of, how much traffic are you expecting and up building this building? So do you have any like estimate or something like?
The easy answer is no, I do not. I'm not a traffic engineer. There are standards used for medical office buildings for traffic engineers, and that could be established, but the extent of the volume of the traffic may be of personal interest to you, but it really has no legislative or decision-making on your part, because that will all be up to PennDOT. And so when we apply for our highway occupancy permit, they will probably request for us to talk about a trip generation and the traffic. So when we come back for the final land development, I can have that information for you just for your knowledge, but it's not something that will be reviewed by the borough.
So next question would be, and this place and is surrounded by the a few houses, and we have some residents, coming to this public hearing. So will you be able to do something just like to help, like not disrupt the other people's life and in future, just after you build this and house or office, because and it looks like it's very narrow and area and it's just like I'm not so just are you gonna build something like to some sort of like isolate this area from surrounding area, just like to help people living in that area, and that will be kind of like some sort of impacted by this by the patient or by the use of this medical office. Are you gonna do something or?
Well, follow all of the requirements of your ordinance in terms of buffering, landscaping, setbacks. We're meeting all of the requirements of the ordinance. We're not asking for any variances. And the fact is, your ordinance says that a medical office is permitted. So we're not asking for a use that you haven't already said is okay at this site. And as I said, we will respect all the requirements of the ordinance as far as setbacks, screening, buffering, all of that sort of.
No
Any
more
other
questions.
questions? Dr. Mr. Schwartzmeyer.
More of a comment than a question, and I think Luke already touched on this. I'll be real interested to see what the plans look like, because obviously this was built as a single family home. It's now being converted to a 2-story medical office building, and I've worked in construction my entire career for UPMC projects, and I think about building exiting, ADA compliance, fire stairs going down. I'm sure you're gonna have patients up on the 2nd floor. So I visualized, and I've never seen the interior of this building, but I visualized the modifications. They're going to be somewhat significant just because of the change of use and the requirements to protect people who may be in wheelchairs or however that are up there that wouldn't apply to a single family residency, in the same way. So it's not a question. It's like, I'm going to be real interested to see what you're going to have to modify in order to make it functional for the use that you're proposing for it.
The building itself will be rather easy to facilitate the office space for the doctors, because the entrance to the building in the front is in the middle and the back lines up with it. So just envision that as a public corridor on 1st and 2nd floor. What will be needed is to add a public elevator, a
Right,
little
sure.
skinny one that you put in a single family house.
Yeah.
So there would be an elevator that would go from the basement all the way to the 2nd floor. And then the appropriate stair tower systems and bathrooms to make that facility. But the building itself, I think, will be very easy to retrofit for the type of custom medical office that we're talking about here. So it's small users. So it'll be pretty easy.
Yeah, and it's a wood frame building, so I don't think modifying its structure is going to be as difficult as a steel and concrete type of an office building would be to modify. So
Exactly. And the heights of because it was designed as a luxury single family house, the ceiling heights are already high. So it's going to be easy to have it fit into commercial modes. So I think that's going to be, from an inside point of view, is going to be very easy on this particular building.
sure. No, I appreciate that. And I think we've already touched on the timeline that Mr. Parks mentioned. I think it's, we have a lot of the public that's been very concerned about the appearance for that for so many years. Unlike Dr. Lee, I live over in the 3rd ward, so I don't pass that, but I do go to St. John and Paul Church over there, but I don't quite go down by it. But you have to admit that it hasn't been the attractive thing to look at for many years. So it's kind of once you get going and assuming the approvals come, I think everyone would appreciate everybody acting in good faith and moving forward as quickly as possible. And I think Mr. Victor already established that that's the intent. You have somebody that wants to move in. So I think assuming approvals do come, I believe that it would be a welcome to the community to see that cleaned up and be more presentable.
Yes, sir.
So thank you very
Schwarzmeyer.
much.
Phillips, any comments or questions?
Yeah, I have one question. Has the sewer authority stated whether this pressure system would be acceptable for their acceptance as part of their public facilities?
Specifically for this use, I mean, this site, no.
Well, you would be creating a public sewer system, even though it's a medium or high pressure system. So they would need to accept it for it to be located within a road right away.
Okay.
So this isn't going to be a private line. But I'm of the impression that they shy away from medium and high pressure systems because of a few different reasons. So I think that's something to explore at this point, unless you're willing to go to next step and put in a gravity system from the front of the property too. I mean, the pump would be fine to the public system, but the public system itself, they may not accept the pressurized system in the road right away. And you have to have the sewer authority accepting that in the road right away. It can't be a private line in the road right away.
We'll check on that.
And you're speaking of both the PennDOT right of way and in the borough right of way,
Well, yeah,
Crostic Ridge.
Want to
We-
maintain a private line in there right away. And
Nope.
I know the PennDOT won't accept that either. And I have an inkling that the sewer authority isn't gonna like it either, pressurized system. So, you may end up having to go with the gravity system.
All right. We'll verify that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments regarding your staff report or other things you've heard in the public hearing this evening, Mr. Phillips?
I don't have.
No? Okay. What?
Yeah.
You gotta speak into the microphone so the.
Yeah,
clerk can-
Mr. Yunker, do I understand there's a mechanism for holding this open so they can get us the kind of the conceptual idea what this building looks like before we go any further? Is that my understanding?
Yes, I mean, we had the extension of time to commence the public hearing, usually 60 days from receipt of the application. So we've commenced the public hearing. If there is materials that need to be submitted, you can continue the public hearing as long as we're not going beyond 30 days. Will not require re-advertising if we announce it publicly tonight to public reopen and resume it at the February 15th meeting. And likewise, the motion would just automatically be carried over to the February 15th meeting as well, provided that is the will of council and there is outstanding items to be presented.
Max, I do have one other thing. There's been a couple of times that it was mentioned that the engineer reviewed this plan. And actually they haven't, for the record, because we don't give applications, just conditional to our engineer, so that we got no review from our engineer or response or letter from them regarding this.
Did receive a letter and it said, we don't review conditional use. We did receive,
Well,
they did get paid, and
Okay.
they did do a letter, and we saw the letter.
We did not comment.
You did
So,
not come.
yeah, so there's no up or down from the engineer because they would be looking at the land development plan rather than the conditional use.
yes, unlike many municipalities, we follow the MPC and do not have the borough engineer do a line for line review of the conditional use application. So thank you, Mr. Phillips, for that clarification. What? It sounds like I was getting two places at once. So we'll go with Mr. Pallad.
Yep, I'll be quick. Okay, just something I thought of as you were going through the other questions. So your roadmap is 6 months from approval. You can submit a land development, probably 18 months to construct, which puts you potentially into December 2025 or, January 2026, right? So about 2 years from now. So I kind of want to ask, because I kind of heard the comment. And I understand you don't want to go through the expense of the 50+ items that are typically required, right? But I don't want to ask, in terms of financing and with loans tightening and getting financing and funding, is the project already funded? Do you need to seek funding? And the reason I'm asking is, my concern is having projects that start and you're not able to finish it. So any comments on that?
I don't know whether the financing is in place or whether it's been applied for. All I can tell you is that we've committed forward good faith. If we don't do what we say we're gonna do, you always have the ability to, as council said, you always have the ability to knock us out of the ballpark.
And the 50 items that you referred to in quoting from Mr. Wilk was that those items must be addressed within the 6 months. So it's not like we're going to wait 24 months from now and address those 50 items. Those land development items must be addressed. We're going to spend some money once that's additional use.
Right, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah,
How
we're
secure
prepared
is
to
your
move
financing?
forward. We understand a timeline on us. Standing here saying we accept that.
But as of now, there's no financing in place.
Well, I didn't say that. I don't know. I don't know whether there is.
We're expensive, but we're not that expensive. Doesn't need to go get a bank loan to pay for us, right?
The only other thing I would add to this is we are trying to do something with this property. Since we have been involved in this project, I think we've done everything in good faith to move this project forward and take care of the eyesore that we all know is there. But, every time we think we're making progress on it, then we take 2 steps back. I assure you, we're interested in moving forward, getting this taken care of.
Great to hear. Yes, I mean, in terms of the borough's history with this has been on for a long time, and it has been great to see a plan coming together that doesn't require a use variance or anything else. It's permitted by code, provided that the requirements are met, and it is, a lot of timelines that are built into this, and a lot of ones that have been accepted and imposed outside of this normal process. But we definitely appreciate that. Mr. Mizlinski, did you have a question?
I was just going to ask in terms of process, are we going to hear from the parties before we make a decision on?
Yes,
I think that's very important.
Yes.
that was my intent to do so. If there are no more questions from the borough, and thank you for the applicants. We can have the members here who have asked for and gained party status can ask specific questions as to this application, and the testimony that Mr. Victor just gave are available to you. We don't have a clock because this is a public hearing. You don't have 5 minutes, but we do ask you to make your points succinctly. You may also just provide comments as to the application, the information that you've heard, and as well as what you think council should do with respect to this application. Approve, deny, approve with conditions. So that's my spiel here. Also, we'll also take regular public comment from people who signed up but did not identify themselves at the beginning of this hearing when we went through that process. So I'll start first with Frank, is it Gesco? Guzik. I can't even read my own writing. I know. Well, there you spoke first. So you get to
Frank
go.
Guzek, Guzek, 2566 B, Wexford Bain Road. Thank you. Okay, first of all, you are not following code, okay? If the way I understand it, the way you're telling me it's for an office, this is an office complex. This is a commercial entity. No matter how you dress it up, that's what it is. And as far as the people here with their blackout lights, that's fine. if you're on the same level or above them. When you're below them, guess what? You get all the light. And I know how bad it is because the gentleman that started the house aimed his spotlight right at my bedroom window for 2 years. There's nothing I could do about it because he was allowed to. I don't mind R4 being used as R4. But a couple years ago, we were here and tried to get it spot zone commercial. It was turned down. Now we're trying to come in through the back door and zone it commercial again. I don't think that should be allowed. And no matter what I do, it will help me, believe it or not, it will help me if you do this, because I can use my property adjoining it to put a medical office in. Alley's property could be used to put a medical building in. We're gonna have a commercial entity in that little R4 zone. Because developers are gonna come in, supposedly they're smart, okay? They're gonna look at this and say, well, you approved this, why don't you approve this? Why don't you approve this? So guys, you got a tough decision to make. I hope you make the right one. You know, I've had to put up with this place well, my boys are 33 and we moved there when they were 5. So that's 26 years, 33, no, 28 years. And, you know, it's a shame what happened. And I feel bad for Dave. I really do. Because he bought into something that was terrible. And, you know, there's going to be a lot of problems, especially with water drainage, because I already got trees coming on my property from the hillside. They're just falling down. And I'm not complaining. I'll clean them up. That's no big deal. Yeah. But it's a fact that the ground is moving. Okay. So that's all I have to say, gentlemen. I thank you for the time.
Hey, Mr. Guzzo, but as a
Go ahead.
party.
Questions for me?
Yes, well, and Mr. Lope, I'd ask if you have any questions? No questions. Okay,
Oh, okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Nick Barone.
Nick Barone, 2400 Rustic Ridge Drive. We're the house that's on the corner. It faces this monstrosity. It's been there. We moved in here and built that house, which is a very expensive home, 12 years ago. Mr. Yochum bought the property 16 years ago. That property is a mess. Nothing but a real mess. It was talked about before when the borough decided it should be tore down. When Tim Phillips went there and took a look at it, he says, this thing couldn't even be saved. It's a mess. It's all mold. It's all weather. And Mr. Yochum hasn't done nothing in 16 years to improve that property. Now he wants to come up with this commercial entity with doctor's offices. You know, where does this all end? I thought all the doctor's offices and all the commercial was on the other side of the church. It was that way before we built our place. Now you want to bring everything down to us. You want to degrade our property by putting some kind of medical building there. What prevents Mr. Yochum from passing this off to a clinic? Would that be on the same scale as what he's proposing? How about if we put in a mental health clinic? Or how about if we put a drug rehabilitation clinic? And I don't know how he gets all this property commercialized as he pictured it. Oh, he's gonna do this, he's gonna do that, in an acre and a half. And he says, well, the building can be re-renovated, it could be made new. Well, why didn't he do that when it was a single family with a septic system in the back? You don't have to go for sewers. You already had a septic system in place. No, he didn't do that. So now he wants to make it a medical building. And then our neighbor, Frank here, hey, he could sell his property for a medical building too. What happens to the valuation of our home? It goes down. Who wants to look at medical buildings? There's a bunch of them up the street. And what about traffic? Try to get out of Rustic Ridge in the morning. I'll tell you what, they come up that road, it's 40 mile an hour. They're coming 50 and 60. We can't, you could look, and next thing you know, you're starting up the hill, they're on your back end. Why shouldn't he be obligated, if he wants an entranceway, to put a turning lane? But they don't even propose a turning lane in there. All the other commercial buildings up above have turning lanes to prevent accidents because people come flying down or flying up. And as far as the sewer coming down Rustic Ridge, yeah, we'll disturb our property. They got to tear up the whole sidewalk. I mean, I'm sorry, they have to tear up the whole street. And the manhole is in the sidewalk. So yeah, they'll be taking out a piece of our sidewalk. I ask you people, you know, as a taxpayer, 12 years in your community, don't do this to us. You know, think about us. This man had time after time after time after time to improve this property. He goes back to Tim Phillips every time. Well, yeah, Tim, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. He gives him another extension and another extension, and nothing happens. I don't believe a word this guy says. You know, why don't you protect us as citizens who have an investment, a sizable amount of investment in our home? else I could tell you people. This should have been done with a long time ago. This should not be permitted. Thank you for hearing me out.
Mr. Brown, Mr. Lope, any questions for Mr. Brown? Sorry. One at a time, please. Only Mr. Brown. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Just for purposes of the record, although we referenced it at the beginning of the hearing, I think it's repeating the definition from our zoning ordinance for medical office / clinic is a building used exclusively by physicians, dentists, and other medical personnel for the treatment and examination of patients solely on an outpatient basis, provided that no overnight patients shall be kept on the premise. This is an R4 zoning district. It is in the red as we saw before. This use of the medical office, it is commercial, is permitted by this process, a conditional use. The quote before about a rezoning, that was not accurate. There was never a zoning map change proposed for this process or for this property. There was a use variance that was applied for in 2010 to use this as a professional office, which is not a permitted use in the R4 zoning district. That is only permitted in the M1 and the M2 districts as a use permitted by right. That was denied by the zoning hearing board because there was no evidence that this could not be used as a medical office or any of the other enumerated potential conditional uses. So I understand that's a lot of history, and I know We are all familiar with the property. And I would just ask for anybody else that wants to speak. If we want to go into the history of this property, we have 2 or 3 nights of transcripts in front of the Building Board of Appeals where we went through the entire history. So I would ask anybody to please confine their comments to this proposed use as a medical office. What's done is done is part of this story, of course, but I think we're all familiar with what happened with this property. And if anybody needs to look at the transcripts, they're welcome to. They are currently under appeal, but are otherwise public records. Next, we have, oops, sorry, I flipped my page, so I lost my list. Dari Gross. Yes.
First off, your picture is wrong. The greens that you have on the.
Yeah, he showed the red line. We show where there are trees on and off. Representing that there are trees on the abutting property.
Also, last time we were here, I know you said don't talk about the past, but have to say this.
Yes.
I talked to Dave, and he told me that this was the worst mistake he has ever made in his life by buying this house. We did talk about it. The water runoff. I live 2 doors down from this house, and the water runoff, I have a video of it. Of course, nobody ever wants to look at it. Tim was at the house and the mayor, who many years ago, nothing was done. It runs all the way down. There's no gutters. There's no big round sand things. There's nothing. All the way down, builds a big pond down at the bottom of my property, runs across the neighbor's driveway, onto Rustic Ridge and down into the drain. Thank heavens they have a drain. Traffic. I agree with you on traffic. It is horrible. Getting out of your driveway is just terrible. You don't want to walk on that road. And people have been hit. I'm sure you guys probably weren't around here then. But you come over that hill, it's just a disaster pulling out. It's just terrible. Sewerage. There was a young girl that tried to get a daycare, school in there. And the PennDOT would not let the sewage go down the road. I don't know what he's even looked into it to get it, because I think Tim had talked about the sewage and said that it's very hard to get it to go down and into Rustic Ridge. Mold, the mold is terrible. I don't get it. And parking, 52 cars. Does anybody know this property? I mean, do you see the property? Those pictures are deceiving. When he showed the house is not way back there. And coming over the hill is not way over there. Believe me, it's not that far. It did not look like that. The good faith in this property. What happened last time we were here, they were talking about condos. And now he comes back to you guys after you turned him down. We were so excited it was going to be torn down. And he had all those people that are going to build condos, went to someone else, came back, and now he has this. He's grasping at this. It's been too many years. It has to be torn down. It's just unbelievable, unbelievable place. The only good thing he has done so far since he has owned that place is when I asked him to put a door on that house. Kids have gone in there. He finally put a door on. He finally covered the windows. Thank you. That was nice. No more animals going in and out. Nobody dumping garbage, a couch, TV. I mean, it's just been a disgrace. And we have had to put up with that. And the traffic, the people coming in and out of there, it's a bad situation. It's going to be just as bad as trying to come out of the Hampton Inn. And I know you all know where the Hampton Inn is. That's the worst place ever to come out of with all the other entrances down there. I feel bad for anybody trying to get come up the hill and trying to get into the Hampton Inn. It's just terrible. But I live 2 doors down and I'm appalled. I've lived here 45 years in that same house. And the Meinhardts that lived there years ago when we were there would just be, it's just a disgrace. And what Franklin Park has done by not trying, I know you tried really hard to get rid of it. We thought we did it. It didn't work. It needs to be done. Now, you can't let this go in. This is terrible. It's just ridiculous. And it would be nice if David Yochus would fix the water that runs down my yard after all these years. It would be pretty. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Gross. Number questions, Mr. Rowe? No? Next, we have Pat Foltz.
Pat Bolts, 2400 Rustic Ridge. As for the house, the people behind me have commented on everything that we have had happen to us. I wanted to ask you all, did you get the letter from Lou and Donna Patterson that she mailed to y'all on this hearing for them, for the house?
Yeah, there were, is that the email that we
No,
got?
that's
That's different?
We did receive one today at noon from Kelly and Greg Simpson
No,
of 241 Rustic Ridge.
Right, and there was another letter that was submitted
Yeah, there were
that
two.
raised issues with prior zoning application. I
There
provided a
was-
copy to
there was
Mr. Lowe.
Missouri.
yes,
Mhm.
that one.
There was Missouri.
Did you people read that? You
We
did.
read
Well-
everything that's been said. Yes.
All right. Because she said everything in there about how Rustic Ridge has put up with this. And how that house has just disintegrated, just, it's a mess. And I wanted to ask Mr. Yoakum, whenever you went to Pittsburgh to go to the hearing for the condos, is that finished or means that you're getting that facility approved? That process is on hold. That's what I thought. And what happens if this is denied? What happens if deny that too, correct?
That is the condemnation action was appealed. It is at the Court of Common Pleas, Allegheny County, which is in downtown Pittsburgh. And, you know, that because it's an appeal, I mean, it just requires briefs and a potential decision by a judge. But because this was proposed, you know, we were seeing how this played out because one of the issues has been this property. There have been a lot of ideas, and that condo plan was, you know, in response to the condemnation. But this is, you know, the first conditional use application that has come through. That the previous zoning hearing board was a use variance, so that's different.
Is this
years
the
ago.
one in 2010 you're talking about?
2010,
Mhm.
correct.
Uh-huh.
Right. So
then-
in terms of our procedure of processing applications as they come in, you know, provided that they are complete and goes through this process, this structure have in place to address it.
The other thing I wanted to find out from Mr. Yoakum is, have you gone to the state to get prices on that store coming down? Wexford Bank? Permission to go through the back. And that's why you're going through Wexford Main Road, is that correct? Why?
I think you answered the question.
Right. And you haven't gone to the state yet to find out how much it's gonna cost to go down and main road, state road? And And all the people on either side are going to have to tap into that at their expense. You know that's the truth. Well, anyhow, that's what it is. Anybody that has, Tim, if a state sewer goes down the main road, okay? Doesn't the people that are in front of that going down there have to tap in within so many feet, their houses
There
within
is some
so?
regulation that the sewer authority has, but that would be pending their decision. I mean, that, we're not in the sewer business, the sanitary authority is.
No, the state is and McCandless is, yes, correct.
Well, the state will give a permit for access, to allow access to their, they'll issue a highway occupancy permit to work in their right of way and for a sewer system to be put in there. But the design of the sewer system and all of the maintenance and engineering and cost will be a separate matter from what the borough does with its land development application. So they're an entity upon themselves. They will be, they'll have to manage that, they'll bond that, they'll do what they need to do. So most of these questions would be better served, be answered by the sewer authority.
Well, any new sewer that I've ever dealt with, I've been a realtor for 40-some years. The people on either side have to tap into that also. People that are,
Yeah, and that may be so, but I don't know the distance or anything like that, so that would have to be, that's not something that we deal with here.
no, I understand, but that's why I was asking. Have you gone and got a price on it? You may have.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the tap fee would be, for the ramifications that's gonna be on the sewer.
Well, McCandless tap fees are $6,500 plus an additional couple
Installation.
thousand for other things, yes. That's what it would be for them, and that doesn't include digging and pulling line and. The only other thing I wanted to mention is on that roadway. Up there by the Spectrum Building and the waterfront and so on, there are turning lanes to get into that. And because of so many, if this gets approved, so many cars, 52 cars and so on, there has to be a turning lane. And there should be a lane coming out of that building one way, going up the hill too. A right lane turn also.
Right, and that would be, PennDOT right of way, so, they would determine if a turning lane is necessary. That's not something the borough can even discuss in a conditional use application.
Right.
We can't put a condition or safeguard with respect to off-site traffic improvements or other things like a turning lane. The other issues, of leaving the property, maybe being a right turn only, may come up in land development, but not necessarily for the
Okay, that
conditional
was the other
use.
issue.
Mhm.
But thank you for listening to us and I hope it works out well for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Foltz. Number 5 on my list, Michelle Connolly. Oh, do you have any questions, Mr. Lowe, before I? Mhm.
Cost. State really has nothing to do with the cost. We have been in contact, we have a contract with the person who installed. Yes. How long does it take us to approval? And that takes time to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe. Number 5 on my list, Michelle Conley.
Michelle Conley, 2405 Rustic Ridge Drive. I live the second house on the left on Rustic Ridge. This will affect my patio, my backyard very specifically. We're talking about lighting. I just don't even want to think about that, what that's going to look like. To his point, that's going to be glaring down on my patio no matter what. We purchased, you talked about good faith. We purchased this property in good faith. And right now, I don't feel like there's any good faith coming from what's going on in that house. As said before, they've had so much time to do things and they just haven't. And that's upsetting. We talk about 52 parking spots. Like, is that necessary? 52 parking spots? I ask you to think about that. And if it is, that's a lot that they have to go back. They have to, dig out. I mean, I worry about the runoff, like Dari had said. I worry about the land being at the top of my hill. This property sits here, and then my property comes down from that. And I worry about the rain runoff and the land being unstable after that. I just want you to, and I just want you to think about like just finishing this. Please put a finish to this. They've had ample opportunity to do the right thing, which is just keep it a single family home. And then there would be no sewer involvement, no further construction. That's really all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, that's all that we had as seeking party status, unless Mr. Lope, do you have any questions for Ms. Conley? No?
Mr. Yunker, I have a couple questions.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. What is your vision as far as what you need to do as far as tree removal and disturbance in that area, which has been talked about tonight as far as water runoff? What do you see? Have you thought through that process of what you have to remove in the way of trees?
A detailed tree survey has not been done.
Okay.
So I can't speak specifically to it, but there is one large pin oak right there in the front yard area, and we've sort of carved out the parking around it so that would be preserved. The extent to which there are some trees back in this portion of the site, those would be removed in order to be able to put in the rear parking lot area. Otherwise, from my walking around on the site, I don't recall there to be anything unusual or specific that you would say this is a specimen tree that should be preserved other than the one we're doing. So,
Well, we had several comments tonight about their concern for runoff. What's your opinion of that?
I definitely agree that there will be an increased runoff, and it's our obligation to do stormwater management. And I've talked about how a detention facility could be located to handle that in the rear yard area, and that a underground detention tank could be used in the front yard area. So again, that would be addressed at the time of the land.
So you would then work through it with stormwater management is what you're saying,
We have an obligation to meet your code requirements. Yes, sir.
right? So there was also several comments about glare lighting. Could you talk a little more about that as far as, is it going to have night hours? And have you thought about ways of reducing the glare to the neighbors?
Sure. There's the lighting that would occur, is not up against the western property line, but is more in the eastern half as it relates to the rear portion of the property. And it would be very easy to put lighting on this side with cutoff shields. And so the lighting would not be a glare onto the property. Don't know enough about the tenants to know to what extent there would be maybe after 5 or 6 o'clock, but given the description of the tenants that we've seen, that I've heard of so far, most doctors don't work past 5 o'clock at night. So in a office situation, so then there's no emergency room situation. So there should not be after hours. So it'd be very easy to control the lighting in the parking
So
lot.
would you use security lighting at night?
There would be probably some security lighting. Yes, sir. But it could be minimal. You wouldn't have to have all the lights glaring. Yes, sir.
Okay, that was my questions. Thank you, thank you very much.
Sir.
Looking at the list of people that signed up, we've gone through everybody. At this point, I'll open up the general public comment. Anybody has anything else to add before we discuss what to do next in terms of the public hearing tonight? and the potential motion that is on the agenda. Oh, sir, yes, I know you already spoke once before, but it'll be quick. Okay.
All I'm gonna say is the reading of the ordinance.
Okay.
That an office is allowed to be there. It's like Dr. Benita years ago, had an office in his house. Because if he had an emergency, he come to the house. He didn't have to go to his office. So that's one doctor at a time. This is a multitude of doctors. This is a commercial clinic. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we're talking about home occupations, which is a whole other discussion that we've had in terms of other conditional use applications. But with that said, I'll turn it over to the applicants. If you have any final words before we start discussing. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Thank you for, as we mentioned at the beginning of public comment, we did receive an email from Kelly Costello Simpson with respect to this property. Oh, and yes. And, you know, for the purposes of the public meeting, we'll recognize that we did receive this. However, under the rules of the MPC, a letter is not sufficient to grant party status or standing. It does, you know, provide general public comment with respect to her concerns over the property and the history of the non-use of the property. So we'll just note that. And I guess for purposes, I can mark it as Borough Exhibit K just in case, but are not treating it as granting standing for any purpose. Yes.
I would object to that. We haven't seen that. We don't have an opportunity to question whatever is in that. Similarly, with respect to the letter that you sent me that was received in Borough January 13th, I think that person was trying to see this. And object to the admission of that also. Should be given an opportunity to question the statements.
Right. Now,
She's certainly.
that's true, and this has been complicated due to the Smith Township decision with respect to using a letter and then taking an appeal when you don't show up. They did overrule the Ori case, which used to say that you could just do that, but for the purposes of this public hearing, we'll sustain the objection to admission of both letters and will not include it as Borough Exhibit K under that basis. Okay. Well, we've heard a lot. We're going on, well, a little less than 2 hours now. As we talked about at the outset of this hearing, Borough Council essentially has 3 options at this time. You can, one, continue the public hearing for receipt of additional information regarding the construction plans, and then have that continue until the February 15th regular meeting. 2, you can move to close the public hearing right now and vote on the motion as set forth. If you are satisfied that Tim's condition, sort of after the fact, would address that. Or 3, you can vote to close the public hearing tonight and continue, or I'm sorry, table motion number 4 to consideration at the February 14th meeting, because that 15th meeting, I'm sorry, because that would be consistent with the MPC requirement that you render a decision within 45 days of the close of the public hearing. I won't ask for a motion. If you want to discuss or give your thoughts, we'll go from there to develop the motion after hearing from council members.
I think we should continue the hearing until our next meeting so that we can get the construction materials.
I agree.
Okay, any objections or other comments? Okay, hearing none, we'd ask Mr. Mizlinski, since you made the suggestion, if you would make the formal motion.
Sure. I move that we continue the hearing until February 15th, our next regular business meeting, so that we can obtain the construction plans from Mr. Yochus.
Second that.
Seconded by Mr. Schwartzmeyer, properly moved and seconded. Is there any debate or discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of continuing the public hearing till February 15th, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Hearing none, motion carries. We will not otherwise post the property or do an additional advertisement, but we will reconvene the hearing on February 15th at 8 o'clock. Thank you all. Oops. Yes. Yes, I think, as we've talked about before, that is not, I know Mr. Schwartzmeyer went into some detail in terms of what the final plans need to look like, but in terms of what, you know, conceptually, this medical office will look like would be in order. And I think, Mr. Phillips, in terms of other applications you've reviewed, you have an idea of what you're looking for and can work with the applicant. Whoop, whoop. Can we be quiet in the back? We're still on the record. Mr. Guzik. Here.
So I think what the ordinance is asking for is construction drawings, so we'll be, with that in mind, I think that we're looking at elevations and what it will look like. And then also the way pretty much the offices will be laid out. You know, that'll give us floor plans. I don't think that we need to, you know, get into the weeds about, you know, MPEs or, you know, structural drawings or anything like that, because that's not what we're looking at.
I think I understand.
So elevation drawings and floor plan drawings, I think, would be in order, properly dimensioned.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And with that said, we are still on the record for that little colloquy, but other than that, we are now continued until February 15th. Thank you all.
Thanks, Sherry.
All right. All right, we're good. So we're continuing. Mr. Yunker.
All right, if we can wait for a second, we are moving on to the next item of business. There is a vestibule if anybody does need to continue on their conversations. But the next item of business is motion number 5. This is resolution number 1323 of 2023. It is a resolution of the Borough Council of the Borough of Franklin Park, Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, granting preliminary and final subdivision and land development approval to RRG Franklin Park LLC for LPF 22-08-02 regarding the Cardinal Ridge Townhouse Plan located at 2570 Alden Drive with conditions. We do have the applicant here this evening who is able to give we have it set up here, a brief presentation. As we stated at the beginning, this is not a public hearing, so we do not have our court reporter. And so we will just proceed with the application. Take it away, Steve.
Stephen Victor Wetzel Associates, here also with Anthony Cosgrove, our legal counsel for this. And we have been before your EAC and Planning Commission, have their recommendation to proceed forward. I'll give you just a brief run through on the site and what we're proposing to do, and then answer any questions that you may have. The site is located, and for orientation purposes, north is to the left on this and all subsequent drawings. So what we have is the interstate. We have the interchange with 910 coming here down Nicholson Road onto Polar on Alden, and now we come to the site itself. Lorick Lane is located right here. So again, the approximate 6-acre site located here, and again is adjacent to office buildings within this area. Next slide. What we're proposing to do is have Dan Ryan Builders construct the buildings for us. And this is a rendering provided by them showing the general character of the architecture. Next slide. The plan proposes to have a cul-de-sac access off of Alden at this location. Again, for orientation, here is Lorick Lane on through here. And so we've set ourselves as far away from Lorick Lane as physically possible, and that's 155 feet. Proposed cul-de-sac. There are no houses in this first portion of the site because this is zoned single family in this area. And it's only when we get back to this portion that we're into the multifamily zoning of the site. So access in with a public street, extending back and terminating in a borough standard cul-de-sac road. We're proposing to have 5 townhouse buildings for a total of 26 units on the property. All of the site will drain back to a storm detention facility located here. And from there, we'll be discharging out, and it would then go into a storm pipe that runs through Lorick Lane in this fashion. Bernie Avon, who spoke earlier, is our immediate neighbor at this particular location. As part of our preliminary and final land development review, we have shown the streetscape, buffer planting, and other landscaping planting that occurs, and specifically wanted to point out the landscape planting along I-79 there. In addition to the buffer plantings, topographically, we are sitting lower than the interstate. So basically you're low, you rise up, and then you drop back down to the interstate in that location. So we're well buffered for our own purposes from the interstate. Next slide. We are asking for 2 modifications. The first modification is that your code requires a 200-foot separation between intersections. Lorick Lane is located here, and if you were to go 200 feet, it would come off of our property. So what we've set it the maximum distance we can, and so we have a 175-foot offset between the existing private Lorick Lane and our access located here. So we're asking for that modification. This is an excellent slide to also show you where the emergency access is required, because we have 26 units on the site. In addition to the cul-de-sac access, we're required to have an emergency access. And so what we're showing is the utilization of a gravel bed covered with sod on which you could then drive emergency vehicles. We think the probability of this being used is exceptionally low. What we're saying is if this intersection right here was clogged, then we have an emergency access. But again, I think the reality of this ever being used is exceptionally small. Next. The second modification we are asking for has to deal with slope disturbances. Our slope categories are located here, with the lowest 0 to 8% and then up to the 25 to 40% slopes in this area. The chart here points out that the allowable percentage in the 15 to 6%. Basically, we're allowed to disturb 0.9 acres in this particular area, and we're disturbing 1.08. So 0.18 of an acre takes us from 55% to 66%. Likewise, sort of distortion in the percentages occurs in the 25 to 40%. We are disturbing 0.02 of an acre, or we would be allowed to disturb 0.02 of an acre, which is 35%, and we're asking to disturb 50% because we're disturbing 0.03 of an acre. So to move 1/100 of an acre, that's 400 square feet, takes us from 35% to 50%. So in both cases, the percentage is really de minimis for this. I know that you have looked at providing relief for this on other projects, and so hopefully that this will be an acceptable number. We have a geotechnical report submitted with this to show that there is no harm with the increase of the slope modification. Next. I do just want to talk a little bit about Lorick Lane and the drainage issue, because it was extensively talked about at the Planning Commission. Again, Lorick Lane is located here. The subject property is located here. On Lorick Lane, there are 3 single-family residents. When Lorick Lane was constructed, they installed a 12-inch storm sewer pipe that runs from here to here, and in order for them to construct the road over that area, because the natural drainage way is from left to right in this fashion. Next slide. So what happens again on Lorick Lane is that our drainage is coming down here in its pre-construction, the existing drainage pattern today. Our water runs to here. It enters into this 12-inch pipe, exits the 12-inch pipe, runs out through, and this is Mrs. Johnston's property right here that she was earlier talking about. It runs across her property and then into a storm sewer at this point that was constructed as part of the Gantry Court development. So then it goes back into a storm sewer pipe. We have stormwater calculations for the 1, 2, 5, 10, 25, 50, and 100-year storm. We look just at the 100-year storm. Pre-development discharge at this location is 7.591 CFS. The engineering calculation shows that a 11-inch pipe will carry that storm today. And so the existing 12-inch pipe is adequate. Next slide. When we develop the plan and we do stormwater management, we will be holding back the water. And so that 100-year storm discharge drops from 7 down to 2 CFS. All that would be needed to handle it would be an 8-inch storm sewer. So in effect, we are putting less volume into the storm pipe than what's there today. And so we believe we have demonstrated to the borough that there will be no harm and to the existing storm sewer system within that area. I would like to just talk about Ms. Johnston just because she brought it up. And I'll do that maybe in a subsequent slide. Next. Okay, that's our site plan. And then let's go to the next slide, please. This just shows our stormwater reductions when we look at the pre and the post, where I talked about the 100-year storm, a reduction of 5 CFS coming out of the 100-year storm due to your borough stormwater management. Also, the pre and post volume on the 2-year storm must be infiltrated back into the ground. And so there's an actual reduction in the 2-year storm levels. So there'll be less water coming in into that drainage way for anything for a 1 or 2-year storm. Next. This is an aerial photo taken back in 1993, showing again the Johnston property. And we can see on that aerial photo, I know it's very difficult for you to see it here, but we can see that there was a existing drainage way that ran down through this area long before Gantry was built. So here's what it was in 93. Next slide. If we then look at the historic photo in 2002, that drainage way was taken away. The prior owner to this property, which is Miss Johnston's father-in-law, if he did it or if they did it, I'm not sure who owned the property in 2002, but between 93 and 2002, this drainage way was removed. We pointed this out to her, and that this condition that she has is because they took away the drainage way. They took the water, natural drainage course away and just filled in the backyard, and the water just runs over their lawn. And she has photos. She may bring them tonight, show them to you, and you will see flooding in her backyard. And absolutely, there is flooding in her backyard, but she took away the natural drainage course in this area. So I have sympathy for her, but it's not anything we're doing, and our volumes will be reduced in the 1 and 2 year storms. And hopefully that is some benefit to them, but the problem they have was self-created. If we just, again, here's the side by side showing Here was the vegetated drainage way previously, and today, that's all been removed and filled in. So we just have a big lawn area and the water's got to run over the top of their lawn and it floods. Okay, back up, maybe 3 slides to our site plan. We'll leave it at that. One more, please. Thank you. All right. Pretty quick explanation of what we went through with the planning commission, and we went through several meetings with them. I think it was very productive, and I think we're here today with just asking for your 2 modifications.
Right. Yeah, the resolution that we have breaks up the 2 slope disturbances into a 1 and a 2. So I think Mr. Malcolm's saying we viewed them as 3, just because they are 2 separate sections on the slope modification. And yes, I mean, this is the night of properties with a lot of history, it seems. This one might not go back as far as the Yochus application. And as we talked about in public comment, I mean, we're all well versed with the scenarios that were presented with the original plans for the access through Lorick Lane, the 3 apartment buildings, then the access more so depicted like this, but through a private driveway, and then the withdrawal of that plan and after approval from the Commonwealth Court. And so now we have this particular plan. I think you've addressed the emergency access way that's there, I guess, just in terms of discussions. For those, I mean, everybody else is pretty much familiar with this, but using the back of the cul-de-sac to go through the Blaymore properties, why is that not possible?
Mr. Wan told us no. We asked him several times.
Any other elevation changes or other impediments in that area? Or I don't know if it goes 1-to-1. If he
Yeah,
ever
there's a little bit of an elevation, but not a big difference. It could have been accomplished to connect directly from the cul-de-sac to his parking lot. And that was, obviously, that's our first choice. We'd love to see that. But he went negative on that.
And in terms of, I mean, are you planning any additional, fencing or screening or anything over there that we'll call it a sort of an emergency?
No, we have no physical barriers there. He has an extensive landscaping that he's put in. We have some landscaping and some street trees that we have in this area. But no, if there was an absolute emergency, yeah, you could easily go in there and probably without even a chainsaw, you could just drive right through it.
Yikes. Well, I don't think we have the SRT anymore, do we, Chief? Back at Rock or the MRAP. I like the SRT.
But it would be physically very easy to make that in the case of an emergency.
Any questions from members of council? We'll do similar, even though we aren't in a public hearing.
Yep.
Ballot.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Younger. Okay, so starting with the cul-de-sac, you had mentioned that potentially a vehicle could plow through it. I do remember you from the planning commission. If I recall, isn't the cul-de-sac 8 feet below the adjoining property, or has that changed?
It's approximately 8 feet above if you go from here to here. But if you come off to this way, his is sloping upward. So it would be possible to make a physical connection right off through there.
Okay. His property is 8 feet above yours,
Below.
If
you at the end of the cul-de-sac right here, if you
Right.
stood right here at the sidewalk, his is 8 feet below in this direction, but because his is rising up right through here, it's almost on grade.
Okay, so the plow through would have to happen there.
The what?
I'm just trying to see like elevation wise, if there were an emergency, like a 1 in a trillion chance, and a vehicle did have to go through, where would it go through? Because
Right there.
Okay.
Right there. It's very easy.
it would be even elevation.
I can drive my BMW on it.
Okay.
It's that easy. And it's not an off-wheeler.
Okay. In terms of parking, for the benefit of the public and council, my understanding is it's street parking. Is there any accommodation for parking in the cul-de-sac or anywhere else? What is the feedback on parking?
No, there's the area from here to here has no interruption with driveways. And so it's easily accommodated on-street parking for visitor parking, et cetera, within that area. So that's the expectation. There are 2 indoor parking spaces per unit and 2 exterior in the driveway. And so, you know, if you're having a couple of friends over, it'd be very easy for them to park in each one of the individual parking driveways. And you know, if you're having some larger gathering, then you would utilize the on-street parking located here, just as you would in your neighborhood if you were having a party.
Yeah, and the reason I'm asking is a concern of emergency vehicles like a fire truck or so coming through, because if everyone did park on the street, yes, I understand, this is a borough width road.
Yes.
Okay, so that is a concern. You're mentioning if a person had friends over, what if 6 of the 26 units had friends over? That's, let's just say 6 cars per there, that's 36 cars, they fit. What I'm trying to get at is, yeah, I don't see like a parking lot, like we have apartments down the street, you know, Nicholson Road, right? Willow Ridge is an example.
Yes.
There's a dedicated parking lot, public spaces, you know, that kind of accommodates people having guests or whatnot.
I think there's a difference between a garden apartment building and its parking lot design. I did that facility. I understand you would look at it and say, well, it looks like a parking lot, and it should function as a parking lot because the density of that garden apartment building is 3 stories high, and you've got all those units right there, and you got to gang them in here. That's what you're doing. But here is just a single family attached type of housing, townhouses. And again, with the extent to which we have, you know, no driveways within this area, there's plenty of room for on-street parking if you were to have a larger event or party at your house. I think the frequency in which that happens is going to be minimal.
Okay, moving on. So Nicholson Road serves as an emergency artery, right? So are there plans for a turning lane to turn into Alden, I think?
No.
Or public, whatever.
No.
Okay.
Easy answer is no. No off-site improvements, we believe are required. I know there's an existing condition, but there are been many comments about having turn lanes along Nicholson Road. But we are not going through any permitting that takes us off our site. So we're not be.
All right, slope disturbances, I understand you're looking for a variance on that,
Modification.
oh, modification, yes.
Thank you.
Correct
Yep.
term. Just feedback, I mean, do you not think this will contribute to more flooding, or, I mean, just,
I think it
What's
has
it do?
absolutely nothing to do with flooding. I think what you have, because you looked at the slopes map and you just said we disturbed it. We're not telling you whether we disturbed it. We might have taken a steep slope because that's where our disturbances are, and we've made them flatter. The runoff coefficient on flat slopes is less than it is on steep slopes. Been no analysis specifically to the modification as it relates to the slope, but I can tell you, just by having done the plan, almost all of the work that we've had is flattening the site, not steepening the site. So.
okay, so that's 4 items. Yeah, and this was just a comment, you know, it's rentals, I imagine this will add additional capacity to schools or students to schools, so my guess is there's no feedback from the school.
Schools.
We just expanded Franklin Elementary, we doubled the size because of these kind of things, so I'm just wondering.
I can tell you from some studies that we have done, on some recent comparisons of single family and townhouses, so I have a pretty good understanding. I would anticipate that there will be a quarter of a child per elementary on this, so per unit. So if we have 24 units, if we have 6 elementary students and 2 mid and 1 high school, I would be surprised. That's the volume of children that you would anticipate out of this type of housing.
And there is a requirement in the MPC after a final land development is approved that the borough is to send a notice to the superintendent informing him of the number of units and the proposed schedule. So that, yeah, it isn't after the fact of everything else, but it is built in to notify the school district before anything's built or anything like that for their planning purposes.
Basically, what if we're talking about one student per grade level is probably the absolute max you would have.
Part of my colleague.
Malcolm? Parks?
I'm just wondering if Mrs. Johnson or somebody else would like to make additional comments at this point in time. Yes.
Should we advance the slides to the one that showed your house?
I would just like to make a clarification. Number one, I'd have to go back to the Allegheny County Real Estate website to find out exactly what year my name is deeded on my house, to determine when I actually moved in there. Right? So apparently whatever old stories, the land was changed in my backyard, probably occurred before I got there. I live with that daily, or I shouldn't say daily, when we get a lot of precipitation, we deal with that. What I should not have to deal with is a consistently wet yard. My yard is not consistently wet now. It can become extremely wet after a large amount of precipitation, but it naturally dries out. Based upon the slope with that drainage coming across my backyard, going into the retaining tank or whatever in Gantry Court, my yard will be wet at a consistent degree every day. How is that my fault? Yes, he may feel bad for me, but if we think about it, I shouldn't have to have the hardship of having a continuously wet yard because of drainage. Am I kind of making myself clear in that aspect? The next thing I wanted to ask was with the off-street parking up there, because that's what he had mentioned, that cars would be parked on the road. In looking at the ordinance, remember I was mentioning for cul-de-sacs? Because at the end of Alden there's a cul-de-sac. So I was kind of counting out the houses on Alden and through Cardinal for the cul-de-sac numbers. But anyway, when I was looking it up, I noticed that these individual sites like Gantry Court had to ask for an ordinance or a variance, something to get a school bus in there to turn around. And in there, it says that you have to have off-street parking at particular times because of that school bus, based upon the ordinances that I read in Franklin Park. How is the school bus going to get up there if they have on-street parking continuously?
It has, and those can be questions in terms of no parking restrictions on one side of the street or the other. But for the cul-de-sac particularly, if a school bus is going to come
Right,
in,
I
we
can't
do.
imagine kids walking all the way down that hill, walking all the way back up that hill every single day, especially parents. without
Not
money.
these days, but.
So I mean, if Gantry Court is going to get one that's in the school bus stop is right there, I'm inferring that they would probably request a school bus to go up.
So, yeah, in those
So in
instances.
that respect,
No,
where the
what
cars
you
would
have to
go.
do is we get a traffic and engineering
Right.
study, usually
But
done by the police that
again,
says.
point to ponder is what I'm
Okay,
saying.
okay.
But again, in conclusion, I shouldn't have to have something that is changed from what it is now to something worse than what I have now. To me, that's a hardship. To me, that's damage to my property. Yes, I feel sorry for Mrs. Johnston with the flooding that I have now when the precipitation comes, but I don't have it on a daily basis. Shouldn't have to deal with it on a daily basis if that continual drip is is coming into my backyard. I'm sorry if I
Yes.
sound harsh.
No, I
But
understand.
I'm the
But
taxpayer.
I wanna-
I'm the homeowner. I pay the property tax.
Right.
I want to have the ability to sell my house for a decent value and not have that property come down
Mhm.
because of something like that. Something that's not my fault, something that I did not do to my property.
And I don't want to put words in Mr. Victor's mouth, but what I heard him say is, he was sorry about the current conditions
Correct.
and what had
Correct.
changed, but I don't think, Mr.
Correct.
Victor, you're talking about, you're not going to have a constant stream going through
You're
here.
not going to have that drip coming down into my yard like you mentioned at all the other meetings.
Well, I mean, it's, go ahead. Yeah.
I think Ms. Johnston has a misunderstanding of how the stormwater works, in which I talked about how the water currently today runs into the pipe. And by the way, we represent about 4 acres of it.
Mhm.
The watershed that goes to her property downstream, that's about 20 acres. So we are part of the contributors,
Right.
but we are only a fifth of the contributor. And so she's going to get the continuous drip from the 4/5, the other 80%. What we're doing with our 20% is we're holding it back and we're going to release it over a period of time.
Mhm.
Has misunderstood that we're going to release that over days and weeks. No, it's over a period of hours in which it's released out. It's not immediate. So there's not going to be this constant drip, drip, drip on her property. In effect, also you have the infiltration that's now required by your ordinance. So the 1 and 2 year storm, we're cut the release on that significantly. I gave you the numbers on that. It took us down probably like 20% of what it's currently today. But we are only 20% of the overall watershed. She has a bigger watershed that serves her, and those people may continue to drip on her as well. So.
Okay, and so, yes, there's no plan for this pond to become a retention pond, wet all the time with a
No.
constant stream. It is a detention pond with maybe a conversion to a infiltration pond at some point.
Oh, it is. Well,
Has that-
initially during the construction, it's not an infiltration, but it's ENS, but once it's converted over, then it's an infiltration.
Mhm.
And that's part of the reason it's got the engineers have sized it the way they have, is it has a very large bottom area in there for that infiltration to take place.
And you will have, ownership and with these rentals here, is this going to be a responsibility of the ownership company to maintain and operate the
Yes,
stormwater facility here?
yes. That's also one of the other factors. I hadn't thought in terms of the if there is nuisances relative to parking, because there's a management company that we can solve that pretty quickly.
Parks, any other?
That's it.
Lizinski?
The only really question I had, I know, and looking back at the planning commission transcripts, when you're talking about modifications you're requesting for the slopes, well, there were claims that those were man-made slopes. Is that pretty accurate?
Yes,
So they're not
Yes.
really natural slopes. They were man-made by other activity on the
right. There's
property.
some grading, et cetera, that have taken place previously on the property.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Lee?
No, I'm good.
We're good. Mr. Schwartzmeyer?
Again, I've heard the 3 conditions that, the 3,
Modifications.
what do you call them?
Modifications.
Modifications that are needed. It doesn't sound like any of them were significantly overpowering, I guess. The disturbance calculations, I'm just not familiar with how that's done. Anytime you disturb anything, you're measuring that against what it is today versus what it's gonna be. I'm looking at our engineers.
Yeah, I think if Steve could, if you could go over where the disturbances are on your drawing. Are they road? Are they for buildings? And discuss the square footages impacted versus what's exist on the site.
Kind of did with that one picture, which I think some of the worst are down here where the stream's leaving.
represents the limit of disturbance that would take place with the grading. That's limited disturbance. So outside of that, so from here to our property line, none of that is being disturbed. That's being undisturbed, all the way around. A significant portion here in the entrance road right through there. None of that is being disturbed by grading. Well, so that's where you then go into these calculations of allowable disturbances, the proposed disturbances, and then the proposed percentages. Again, we're allowed to disturb 100% from 0 to 8%, and we're only disturbing 58%. So we're not asking or even come close to the allowed disturbance on it. We're allowed in the 8 to 15%, 75%, and we're right on the mark there. We're at 74% with its disturbance levels. And then again, the two that we are asking for is the 15 to 25 for 8.18 to 18 hundredths of an acre of area. So that's about 7,000 square feet of disturbance on it.
And where's that out on the site, Steve?
This color,
And that's for construction of the street. Yep.
in very minor, typically on this one is 400 square feet. So this is over. And it's just one of those things where, we're sort of given the slopes that we have, and sometimes those slopes occur in an area where you just must do construction. So that's sort of why we get.
So I guess my question is, we're not creating any situations where we have steep slopes at the perimeter of the site. Everything's gonna pretty much. Well, I always think of slopes. You could say there's a mound of dirt there, and if I take that mound and flatten it out, I've disturbed a slope, right?
That's correct.
So it's kind of an unusual, I guess it's an engineering terminology, but it's kind of an unusual way to think about it. What I worry about is anything where you have an angle of something you're leaving that could then slide in the future or something. And we try to keep things like that under control so that we're not going to get something sliding away. So I don't see that any of those type of situations are going to be remaining on the site when you're done.
That is correct. And again, I think we said it earlier, we're taking steeper slopes and making them flatter.
Right.
That's a disturbance. And that's sort of how we get to these percentages. It's, but we're not creating new steeper slopes.
Right. And I'm looking at I have that on my computer screen, and it's clearer, and topo lines, I can actually read them. So, all right, well, I understand that. I think there was a question about the school buses going there, and I do not believe, I was a school board member for North Allegheny for 10 years, and I don't believe the school buses would go up there. I mean, I could check with Rob Gartner or one of the facilities people. Most likely they won't go up that street. School children can, I forget the distance they can be expected to walk to a point where they're collected. And they won't make them do it on a state highway where they'll stop at every home. But in a plan like this with sidewalks, they'll make them come out to the nearest intersection because they don't never want to back a bus up. It either has to be the right circumference that it can go around and make a loop on its own, or they just won't come up it.
Marshall Township is the same school district as you.
Correct.
Recently did a project there, and in which it's a longer cul-de-sac than this, and there will be 30 single-family houses. And we had specific discussions with the school, and they will not bring a bus up for 30 students.
Right.
One, because it's a cul-de-sac, and two, it's just not enough. So I didn't even waste my time trying to talk to them about bringing it back for 26 townhouses. They will not go back in here. They'll stop and turn around somewhere on Alden or Polar or whatever they're doing today. And these children will walk or their parents will take them out to wherever that school bus drop is.
I'm pretty sure that's correct, but I think it's always good to confirm that with the school district because they like to know about these things as they're going in. And, you know, used to be Rob Gardner. Rob has since retired, but, I think Bill Kirk is.
Bill
falls
is
on-
the one I,
it
Bill was
falls
the
under
one I
Bill.
worked with on the Marshall project. And
Yeah.
he was quite clear that they don't go up in something this small.
No, I'm 99% sure, I don't have my school board hat on it anymore, but they won't go up that street. So if they do though, that's a problem because, and I think the chief could even tell you here, we have some places where they do go and we have to prohibit turning at a cul-de-sac if the buses are in fact going to do that. So we've actually got, I think the one over in Diamond Run, chief, we had to post one over there. From like
Certain hours,
7 to
during the school
9
year.
and 2 to 4.
Yep, if that comes to that, we have no problem with doing that, but, and it would be a nice luxury to have the bus come back in here, but if bus isn't coming back.
No, I'm pretty sure it won't.
It won't.
Right. Sure. Well, we have an ordinance in Franklin Park against parking on any streets like that anyway. No, I live on Cole Road over here, so it's a more trafficy road than what this is gonna be, but, yeah, I mean, I had a contractor leave a pickup along the road for like a half hour and I'm getting a call. What's this guy doing parked on the street? So they don't like you to be on the street regardless, but this is gonna be, being a cul-de-sac, it's gonna be much less traffic. Okay. Oh, thank you, Victor. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
And any other comments from
No, sir.
interested parties? All right.
Hi, I'm Bernie Avon again. Just some questions that, you know, the judge and everything, and Max, I don't know if you can disclose any more information to us about how he was able to do that. I'm still like, that's an inalienable right.
Well,
It's a private property.
correct, but
So like, if I say to Kathy and Matt and Patty, who live in the other homes, and we all get together and say, you know what? They made this, we don't know what you're gonna vote yet. We're still waiting to see, but like, let's say it's approved. We're like, okay, we're worried about trespassing now on Lorick Lane. So we put up a no trespassing sign, but if somebody is continually trespassing down Lorick Lane and down to our properties, and they're just ignoring the signs that we put up in our verbal requests not to do it, and then there's a written request that goes out and they still ignore it, if it goes to court because of this precedence that's been set, is there legal standing for the residents of Lorick Lane to maintain their private property ownership? Are we now saying that our land, our private drive has been commandeered by Allegheny County? So now does Allegheny County take over maintenance, plowing, regrading, putting in a storm system all the way out to Gantry Court? I mean, who's responsible for that? Also, what happens if there's a 101-year storm, right? Where does the water go? It's going on my property. So who do I sue for damages? Do I sue the borough or do I sue Red Rocks? Couple questions I have.
Right. And I'll try to unpack, but by and large, when we're dealing with access over a private lane, and that is what the Commonwealth Court has said, that is a private property dispute. No trespassing signs, establishing who has the rights there, who has the maintenance responsibilities among the individuals there. There is that new private road maintenance law that in the absence of a recorded maintenance agreement, there is a provision now for how those costs are to be allocated. My only comment on this is, and I have the case, I mean, it's published, or no, it's an unpublished decision because but it is still available online. Trying to find the actual number, because there were two at one time, but it is number 971 CD of 2016. And so whatever the briefs said, you know, it was the arguments of the parties, and they are somewhat repeated in the opinion, but the opinion is what, you know, tasked the borough or said, borough, you should not have been, you know, concerned about the, you know, use of Lorik Lane to access. Because you can see on this picture where that stub and that dead end is, it goes in sort of right below where the detention facility is proposed. So it was originally, when laid out in the Nicholson Heights plan, and I forget when that was, 1950s or so, showed, you know, this street going to this property. And by operation of law, when a road is laid out but not open and accepted, any owner within that, you know, subdivision plan has rights to use the street. It's an easement they have over it. If that street was never, you know, get gravel down, nobody ever drove over it, was a paper street, you know, you would own to the center line. You could, you know, record a new deed to vacate, you know, that paper street, but all the owners in that plan would have an easement right over it, and you would have to separately extinguish it. So that is a whole other area and discussion. And yes, I mean, these will be your neighbors, that property owner, management company who owns right there on the property line, you know, has requirements that they can't be a nuisance to you. And if they are a private nuisance, it becomes a private cause of action and a private dispute. The borough gets involved if, you know, there are parking issues there, or public ordinance violations. But when we're dealing particularly with private lanes like Lorik Lane, it's a whole other body of law that is not as directly implicated into these types of decisions. And if this was the first one out of the gate, you might say, well, we can't really address anything, but we do have the benefit of this opinion now that says that this owner has some access and some rights to it. And if it becomes dispute over maintenance and everything else, I mean, that's your, I don't know if you have a recorded maintenance agreement, or you can defer back to that new law that came out, but those would be disputes between private property.
Okay, so you're saying that really the next steps for Lorik Lane, if we choose to go this route, would be a private litigation discussion between us and Red Rocks that would not involve the borough, which opens us up for potential slapback suits, correct?
Well, those laws have been tightened up, that you don't see the strategic lawsuits against public participation as much anymore. And if it is a private dispute with property lines and drainage easements, it becomes a dispute. That, you know, has been used when developers sue people who come to these public meetings and say, I don't like this plan, and approve it. And those have been tightened up in terms of the court being willing to dismiss those quickly. But what you're talking about is more of a one-on-one interpretation of this deed, declaratory judgment, the access rights, and just the general day-to-day interactions between neighbors that hopefully avoid the courts and can be worked out. And I understand it's difficult with an unknown entity, somebody new, and a management company as well, but yeah, they would be a neighbor.
Okay. Think here. Let me go into my next concern. So we've talked about the variances tonight. And
Modifications.
Modifications.
Yeah, right.
Okay, but I think of it as a variance, and from what I've been led to believe in my small knowledge of law, when a variance or a modification is granted, it is typically done for two reasons. One, it's a de minimis exemption. And I think Stephen Victor in his presentation here tonight was saying that all three of them were de minimis. I don't know about the slopes, the calculations and all that. I'm a little unfamiliar with that. I know we got a little bit of education on it here tonight, but it still seems to me that going from 55%, I mean, because there's, from what I understand from that ordinance, he had to get a geotechnical analysis done to extend his slope disturbance number to 55. And I think he mentioned that in the presentation. That's just to get it to 55. He's gone well beyond that. So what I'm seeing here are three material modifications that were granted. Now, I know you guys still have to vote on this, so I don't know what the final call is on this, but I just want to know, like, do you guys see it as de minimis as he was pushing it forth, or are we talking about something that's more than that here? The other reason that a variance or a modification would be granted was demonstration of undue hardship. And from what I understand, undue hardship does not include financial hardship. So if it's going to cost him more money to do it a different way, tough luck. He should have done his research better before he bought the property, right?
Correct. No,
You were gracious enough to give him leave with my already on private property. I don't know if you knew
I do think, no, and I appreciate that, but I do think in terms of an explanation of the process is certainly in order. And yes, I mean, there are sound like interchangeable terms and we use them ourselves sometimes, but at least the standard that this council and others have to follow is that a variance from a zoning requirement is a harsher standard. You have different requirements that come into play. For a modification of a saldo requirement, which are generally engineering type of considerations, I mean, we have it right here in the saldo. I mean, it talks about modifications in cases of physical hardship. In any particular case where the applicant can show by plan or written statement that by reason of exceptional topographic or other physical conditions, strict compliance with any requirement of this chapter could cause practical difficulty or exceptional and undue hardship, Borough Council may relax such requirements to the extent deemed just and equitable so as to relieve such difficulty or hardship, so provided that such relief, if granted, will not be a detriment to the public good and will not impair the intent and purpose of this chapter or the desirable development of the immediate neighborhood. A de minimis concept is in the variance world, where if you have a setback of 25 feet and you need just 6 inches, the courts have said, well, that's de minimis, that's not even a variance, you should just get that. There's not a one-for-one translation here. What I think Mr. Schwartzmeyer was going at, we've got a particular piece of property here that was previously changed or otherwise graded, that we have standards in terms of slopes that are in the code, but does provide if they get a geotechnical report that says this will be safe, those can be modified and waived. And these were 3 individual votes that the Planning Commission took. They are included in the approval resolution as part of the consideration tonight.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Max. My next question is, if I got together with my neighbors on Lorik Lane and we decided to erect a gate with a security code to get down the lane, what kind of scenario plays out from that?
That would be something we would have to look into, but by and large, I mean, with a private road, you have certain abilities to manage it, but there is other public use in terms of the mailman going down there, the police needing to respond. There is a case out of Peters Township, I believe, that essentially said you can't gate a private road, but once again, I'm just.
This
speaking off
happened in
cuff.
Cranberry Township.
Good.
There was a farmer who had a agricultural lot that he was using. And one of my good friends lives in Adams Ridge, and there was a private, it used to be a public road, but then Pine Township came in and they made it a private road, and immediately this farmer, he erected a gate, and it basically stopped all flow of traffic there. I don't know what happened, the legal recourse is, but I just found that very interesting when I heard that story. So, but that is a different scenario than what we're dealing with, because Lorik Lane has always been private. It's never been public. In fact, my neighbor Kathy, she hasn't spoke tonight, but she did send me, I wasn't here when the sanitation line was brought down. But what's interesting is the borough had to send a letter to her and her late husband, Greg, and all the other residents on Lorik Lane about granting that right of way and being compensated for it. So that tells me again, it's not direct evidence, but it's another circumstantial evidence that points to the fact that it's privately held property. And I don't think we're disputing that, but it's just sad that a judge can come in and just take my private property rights.
Well, no, I mean, once again, it's still private, but your neighbor, has access to it. And yeah, that is what the case said or announced. And no, that situation with, what the borough needs to do to have access to it is a completely different scenario and story.
Well, I don't think I have anything else, so I will let you guys move on, but thank you for your time.
Mr. Amon? We stopped or if you were.
They're gonna be typical, we've had emergency roads connect two different things, Westgate. It's coming on paved road and it's grass here. Two stands with and the police and fire have if we need an emergency. There's gonna be some, with that, it's gonna be open.
Just be a gravel path over which you would put topsoil and seed it. If you drove over the top of it, your wheels would not sink into the mud. It could support you, but other than that, you will be mowing it, etc. You won't really know it's there. Yeah.
Isn't that an issue? If it's an emergency lane, you don't know it's there.
Well.
This.
Yeah.
They know.
Yeah.
If.
Absolutely. If it's deemed that that would be reasonable to put up a chain and provide you a copy with the key, absolutely, we have no problem with that.
Yeah, that has come up before in terms of the missing emergency access ways that become overgrown or not realize that they're there. So it is a excellent suggestion.
We'll work with you on that. If it's deemed that it needs to be chained off, we'll be happy to chain it off.
And I think, looking at this site plan, so after the Deerfield Manor plan, or Deerfield Estates plan, we did change the ordinance to provide for a buffer area between property and the interstate, preserving existing vegetation as much as you can. And I know this site has been worked over or so, but I mean, do you have some existing as shown on here, and then you're prepared to do other?
Yeah, this is the existing vegetation that would remain, and same thing along here. So you basically then we show here the proposed planting. We have an extensive amount of landscaping proposed on here. was reviewed by your EAC. They were quite comfortable with the plant selection we had and the, the quantity of it.
Designed in accordance with our buffer ordinance for along the interstate.
That's correct. The extensive planting here meets your interstate buffer requirement.
Sure.
I'm Marissa Avon, 2604 Lyric Lane. The retention pond that you're talking about, I have two little boys, and so my concern is we live right next door. Is there going to be secured fence around it? The retention pond?
That's a dry pond. It's not a wet pond. Plus, I believe that your depth is less than 4 feet.
So exactly what is that going to,
So our ordinance wouldn't require him to put a fence around.
would it be like a grassy, muddy?
Well, I don't know if
Area?
it'd be muddy, it would be a depression. It wouldn't be muddy because that would be an erosion issue. So
So if you could walk across it?
probably rock line.
Oh, okay. So it's not going to be a danger. It's not going to be,
Right, they're not gonna be able to.
I was just envisioning an actual pond. there.
No, right.
That's not it.
Well, we're trying to, yeah, that's not proposed.
Okay.
What holds the water and you store your stormwater above that pond level. In this case, there's no water, so you can, so it's dry, holds water for a couple hours. And put it away.
Okay, thank you. On that clarification.
Good point. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, so I guess we need a motion at this point.
Yes, I moved to close the public hearing.
There's no.
It's not.
It's not. That's my notes from. the
Gentleman is
previous-
out of order.
Boy, it seemed like it.
That's the
didn't it?
Well, we can open one for you.
Yeah.
I move to adopt resolution number 1323 of 2023, granting preliminary and final subdivision and land development approval to RRG Franklin Park LLC for LPF 22-08-02 regarding Cardinal Ridge Townhouse Plan located at 2570 Alden Drive with conditions.
Second.
Any discussion?
I'm just want my fellow council to know that I'm not convinced that allowing a modification from the 55% to what they're asking would be permitted under the law. I don't think that we've heard any explanation of what the hardship would be required to grant that modification. So I plan to vote no on it.
Okay, thank you. I think therefore we probably need an individual vote.
Roll call vote?
A roll call vote.
Will you be voting individually on the modifications, 1, 2, 3, and then
Yeah.
this overall plan? Or are you just gonna bundle it?
The way the motion and the resolution said is in the positive sense, and it does address all three
Okay.
modifications.
Thank you.
No.
No.
Yes.
No.
No.
Yes.
With that, the motion fails. We will issue a written decision in 15 days. It sounded like, at least from Mr. Malkin was stating, that seemed to be your basis.
That was my basis. I didn't hear any hardship evidence to describe why we would go from 55% to what they're asking. That was it.
I know you've already voted, but I think what was explained was that we talked about the percentages are a distortion due to the smallness of the number. And we talked about how that we're taking steeper slopes and making them flatter slopes. Not sure. And we said that the support was also given by the geotechnical reports that were reviewed by the borough council, if that is your only concern, then I would, if it's possible, have you be voting on each one individually as opposed to this, if that's the only matter.
Well, I mean, it sounds like it is. I guess we can ask, does anybody have concerns about the modification for the intersection? No? And let me get my resolution. Oops, nope, I have it. In terms of the first request for steep slopes, which was 15% to 25%, no more than 40% of such areas shall be developed and or regraded or stripped of vegetation unless a soils engineer certifies to the stability. When a soils engineer has certified the stability of soils and slopes, their percentage of disturbance may be increased to 55%. Mr. Malkin, was that your?
I definitely said that I disagreed with granting this modification, this one here, the one that you just read.
Okay.
Absolutely. There's another steep slope here. Again, without the hardship evidence, I would not grant this modification. So both steep slopes.
Okay.
But is that the reason the other 3 no votes were put in?
Is there any, as council knows, the reason for denying preliminary or final land development plan and subdivision need to be based on specific requirements in the ordinance that this does not meet, or in the case of requests for modifications where it's acknowledged that the item is not met, an establishment of a hardship and a relaxation of such relief in accordance with the code. Is there anybody that has any review of or other thoughts of other ordinance provisions other than the 2 modifications regarding slopes as a reason for denying this application?
No.
We've got clarification and we'll address the letter to that effect.
There's no
Within
chance
15
to
days.
re-vote and just deny the 2 modifications for slopes, but still approve the plan?
Well, that would be interesting. How would that work?
I think we would ask you to separate the votes, to vote just like the planning commission did, vote on each of the modifications separately. And then vote on the plan itself. Because obviously we are talking about such a minimal square footage of area to bring us into compliance that.
Sure. We will either recess or we can continue on with our other motions. We have.
Yeah, let's
Why
continue.
Why don't we
if can.
continue on the other motions?
This might be a quick.
So I think the point would be, because I obviously, I know what Steve's asking, it's not possible, Max, I'm aware of that. Would there be a way to table? We would grant another extension table because we would have to basically show that we would not need the
Right.
modifications.
Right.
So if we were able to do that and no more longer request the modifications and come back just requesting the street modification and then approval of the plan, is that something we can entertain?
Well, I mean, in terms of you having the control of the application, any timelines, I mean, acknowledging that, yes, you grant an extension for some time. I mean, I'm concerned about going through and approving the plan, but not the modifications because we don't know what the plan looks like.
Correct.
Once
That's
you've
why-
done it. And so it becomes a question of is that possible to even do, which kind of defeats that there was a hardship at all. But I mean, I know in terms of our other cases, here and or offers to look at the plans and revise it, that might have been before the vote, maybe not afterwards. But might be a consideration for council. If you wanted a motion to consideration to get an extension of time for a submission of the plan minus the modifications at issue for slopes, that could be in order. And I would look to or two that voted yes of begin with, potentially address it that way. And I will say, once again, the Judge James and Commonwealth Court does look at this process as, exercises of good faith. We talked a lot about good faith with Mr. Yochus in terms of, working with an applicant to get a plan as clean as possible. And we do task our planning commission with that. And they did appear since going back to July or so when this was officially applied. It is worth a consideration that if that can be addressed, there are no other issues with the plan, that is certainly a faster and less expensive for the borough in terms of preparing a denial and defending a case and having to address these issues.
Okay, I move that we grant the applicant an extension of time to revise the plan and remove the 2 modification requests for steep slopes.
Fully made. Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second it.
Properly made and seconded. Now, I know we were sort of making this up on the fly, and we had the discussion about the Sunshine Act and needing a motion to amend the agenda, but because this item was specifically on the agenda, we don't need to do a motion to amend the agenda. But as of now, the motion for an extension and a resubmission addressing the 2 slope modifications has been properly made and seconded. Any debate, discussion?
Next, can I ask a point of clarification? Can this vote be deemed as nullifying the denial vote?
Yes, I mean, essentially,
Yeah, I just want
a
to.
reconsideration
Yeah.
of sorts. I would, I guess, request another roll call vote, just in keeping with the previous.
No.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and the result of 3-3 tie means the mayor breaks the tie. And keep in mind, this is just on the request to accept their consent to extension of time to revise the plan to remove the 2 modifications. This will come back before council hopefully next month for another vote on an approval or a denial.
Strictly for an extension of time.
Correct. Okay. With that, a tie-breaking vote, the ayes have it. We'll,
Yeah, so Tim, do you know what our extension would actually be, just so we can formally grant it? Not in terms of, I don't know when our approval was.
you had till the 19th was in the staff report, which is tomorrow.
Yeah, so we can grant 30 days.
Right. Yep, that would be the day after the next council meeting. Okay. All right, well, I think that addresses this matter. Thank you very much. Thank you. See you all next month.
All right, moving on. Motion 6.
Move to acknowledge receipt of the Borough Engineers the date January 4th, 2023, and to declare the request made by Cardinal and Contracting or Peter of Contract for the Borough to accept the dedicated public improvement in the Square Road 3 plan.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes. When I looked at that plan, there was a whole section in there about the trails and going through people's backyards and all of that.
Correct?
Pardon me?
Yes, yeah.
Right.
I realize that's one of the, is that still something on the table I mean, when I looked at that, I'm not sure that any of those residents would want that.
Right,
I know that's how he presented it.
right.
But I guess what I'm interested in is what's the borough's perspective on that? He owed that, what's his plan, 10 years old?
Well, longer than that, 20.
It's a 20-year-old plan.
Yes.
And a trail that was supposed to have been put in 20 years ago wasn't put in. And now
Correct.
everybody's got that landscaped and we're gonna dig up everyone's backyard to put.
Right,
I
that,
don't-
that's still, I mean, a discussion point, but in terms of the letter, I don't believe that addressed it. There were some other minor issues, monuments, other sidewalk
Sidewalk
repairs,
repairs.
your typical things you see.
Yeah.
Sidewalk
I-
repair,
I
some
appreciate the
vegetation in the
denial,
pond.
but that was one of the points in there. So I guess were we voting on the whole thing as a denial or are we ever gonna talk about the trails and whether or not we're gonna consider that?
Aspects.
Yeah.
Aspects. Aspects.
I mean, I guess that has to be, finalized, that decision. I don't think anybody was adverse to that.
You know, all the other items I'm fine. with.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
basically, I think the denial is pretty much on just some repairs.
Yeah, that's my,
Not really on the.
They were actually making two requests for the,
Trail and fence.
remove the trail and
Fence.
remove the fence around the detention facility.
Correct.
which isn't,
But this is, I think this denial is specifically for maintenance items like sidewalk and.
He has items to complete.
I'm okay with, I agree on that, but I think it was all in the same letter.
Correct.
So
It
it's
is,
in the
yes.
same letter. So.
Well, I guess we'll cross that bridge when we come to it on the trail and the.
Okay.
yeah, I think the more pressing one were the other items that are missing, and that one is still a discussion about how we undo it essentially, because it is on reported plans. And I'm sure if we ever got performance security for it or otherwise, and it would be a question of we move to acceptance. The acceptance ordinance may reference the waiver of this walking trail. Or it might even task the developer with going house to house and getting everybody who lives in the plan, who's had a trail going through the backyard to sign off and say, I don't want it, because it's a dedicated requirement, and the developer doesn't put it in, and the borough doesn't hold them responsible, and it's not otherwise sort of waived or modified. Future property owners can compel the borough to install. Not be good.
Any
I'm
further
not gonna say
discussion?
anything more. I just think it's, so if I lived there in that home for my home for 20 years and somebody says, I'm gonna put a walking trail through your backyard.
Right.
I don't know if I'd be too tickled about it.
This motion doesn't stop us from making that decision at a later point.
Okay, all right, I agree.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move to accept the resignation of Cheryl Bishop, financial clerk, effective January 31st, 2023.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move the president of council be authorized to sign checks and in his absence, the vice president of council or second vice president of council be authorized to sign checks.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move the official depositories for the borough funds for the year 2023 be Charles Schwab Institutional, First National Bank, Pennsylvania Local Government Investment Trust, Pennsylvania Treasurers Investment Program, and Westview Savings Bank.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move to ratify resolution number 987-2010, adopted September 2010, setting forth a municipal expenditure policy to safeguard borough resources and prevent unauthorized expenditures of borough funds, and to authorize the administrative staff to distribute the policy to borough board commissions.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Yunker, would you summarize resolution number 1320-2023?
Certainly, this is resolution number 1320 of 2023. It is a resolution of the Borough Council of the Borough of Franklin Park, Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, amending and revising the schedule of fees per borough ordinances.
Move to adopt the resolution number 1320-2023, amending and revising the schedules of fees per borough ordinance.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, just one comment. I just would recommend that in the future, the borough explore indexing the fees to an inflationary index moving forward. That's it. Yeah, that's it.
Just a comment or?
Just, yeah,
Okay.
comment. Yeah.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Yunker, would you summarize resolution number 1321-2023?
Yes, this is resolution number 1321 of 2023. It is a resolution of the Borough Council of the Borough of Franklin Park, Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, recognizing the Franklin Park Volunteer Fire Company #1 as the fire company which renders service to the citizens and inhabitants of the borough, and authorizing the payment by the borough treasurer of the proceeds of the tax on foreign fire insurance premiums received from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to the Relief Association of the Franklin Park Volunteer Fire Company #1, or so much thereof as the Borough Council shall determine pursuant to the laws of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for the year 2023.
Move to adopt resolution number 132-2023, recognizing the Franklin Park Volunteer Fire Company #1 as the fire company for the Borough of Franklin Park for the year 2023.
Second.
Any discussion?
Actually, and the number should be 1321.
That's
This one number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's missing.
Yeah,
It's missing.
yes.
1321, yeah.
1321.
Yes, 1321. So that's it.
With that modification, all in favor?
That was a waiver.
Motion opposed. Motion carried. Mr. Yunker, could you summarize 1322-2023?
Yes, this is resolution number 1322 of 2023. It is a resolution of the Borough Council of the Borough of Franklin Park, Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, appointing fire police for the year 2023 and providing for duties and control by the chief of police.
Move to adopt resolution number 1322 of 2023, appointing fire police officers for the year 2023.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion
Move-
opposed? Motion passed.
Move the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette be designated as the official newspaper of the borough.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just to let everyone know that we do have to advertise in a print newspaper, and it's the last one left. That's why we do it. We've brought it up with our state legislators, but would like to not have to do that anymore, but as of now, that's what we have to do.
It was 2 days a week. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move to appoint the Honorable Brian Malkin as the delegate to the Allegheny County Boroughs Association.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move to appoint the Honorable John Lee as the delegate and the Honorable Tom Schwartzmeyer as the alternate for the North Hills Council of Governments.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move the treasurer's office be authorized to prepare a check in the amount of $9,000, $784.75 payable to Northland Library for the first quarter payment of 2023.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move to accept the service order authorization dated October tenth, 2022 from LSSE Civil Engineers and Surveyors for the Acorn Park Development Project as identified under PA Department of Conservation and Natural Resources Grant Contract Number BRC-PRD 26-297 at a cost of $140,500 to include 6 tasks detailed in the SOA, plus the cost to have a geotechnical report prepared by a geotechnical engineering firm to be determined.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Move
Motion
to
carries.
accept. Move to accept and resignation of Craig Dean from the Technology Advisory and Committee effective January 1st, 2023.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Yunker, could you introduce ordinance number 674-2023?
Yes, this is ordinance number 674 of 2023. It is a proposed ordinance of the Borough of Franklin Park, Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, amending Chapter 159, Property Maintenance in the Code of the Borough of Franklin Park to adopt the 2018 edition of the International Property Maintenance Code, regulating and governing the conditions and maintenance of all property, buildings, and structures by providing the standards for supplied utilities and facilities and other physical things and conditions essential to ensure that structures are safe, sanitary, and fit for occupation and use, and the condemnation of buildings and structures unfit for human occupancy and use, and the demolition of such existing structures in the Borough of Franklin Park, providing for the issuance of permits and collection of fees therefore, repealing all ordinances and parts of the ordinances in conflict therewith, and establishing severability and effective date provisions.
Thank you, Mr. Yunker. Would you now introduce ordinance number 675-2023?
Certainly, this is proposed ordinance number 675 of 2023. It is an ordinance of the Borough of Franklin Park, Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, amending Chapter 122 Fire Prevention in the Code of the Borough of Franklin Park to adopt the 2018 edition of the International Fire Code, providing for the issuance of permits and collection of fees, therefore creating a new Article 3 entitled Fireworks in accordance with the Act 74 of 2022, repealing all other ordinances and parts of the ordinances in conflict therewith, and establishing severability and effective date. Both of these ordinances will be advertised for action at the February regular meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Yunker.
Move Lindsay Stack be appointed to the Scholarship Selection Committee to fill the unexpired term of Ron Toombs, which term will expire December 31st, 2023.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move to authorize the first one-year agreement extension with Melee and Melee and Sons Incorporated of Braddock, Pennsylvania for the period May 1st, 2023 through October 31st, 2023 for milling and disposal of bituminous pavement materials, maintaining the cost of $2.70 per square yard and $3,750 per mobilization, and all terms and conditions of the previous agreement shall remain the same.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move to accept the resignation of Mark Matera from the McCandless Franklin Park Ambulance Authority Board effective January 14th, 2023.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just want to thank Mark for his many years of dedicated service to the borough.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
I move to amend the agenda to add an appointment to the McCandless Franklin Park Ambulance Authority to fill a vacancy.
Second.
Any discussion? All in
Public
favor?
comment? Two. Open it to public comment. This was not on the agenda. No.
Come on, Dwayne, you haven't talked all night.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
I move that Thomas M. Stein be appointed to the McCandless Franklin Park Ambulance Authority Board to fill the unexpired term of Mark Matera which term will expire December 31st, 2023.
Second.
Any discussion?
Comment?
Public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations.
Move to authorize the execution of the sanitary sewer line easement agreement between the borough and Andrew David and Erica Megan Bruner for property located at 2134 Reese Run Road in a form acceptable to the solicitor.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Comments, Mr. Ebner?
None.
Mr. Yunker?
What haven't we done? No.
You're gonna cede your time to Mayor
Yes.
O'Keefe.
Well,
Yes, quickly, I have to thank Mark Matera for his really one of devoted time on the ambulance board, and we're gonna miss his presence there. And I wish Dr. Stein the very best as he replaces Mark on that very important board. And thank Craig Dean, for his time on the technology committee. And want to thank and congratulate Cheryl Bishop. Cheryl's been a great financial clerk for us for a few years now, and she's now going on into her retirement years. And in my conversations with Cheryl, one of the things she's looking forward to is spending time with her grandkids. So we wish her the very best with that. And Ava became quite sick tonight, and she asked me to extend to council her apologies for having to leave. But she all of a sudden just was very sick. So that's the end of my report. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Pallet?
Yeah, I just want to wish my ward mate, Dr. Lee, and anyone else who celebrates a happy Lunar New Year. It's on the 22nd, and I believe it is a Year of the Rabbit.
Wow.
No comment.
Mr. Mizlinski?
No further comments, Mr. President.
Dr. Lee? Mr. Schwartzmeyer?
I've said enough.
Haven't we all?
Ava's not here. Kevin?
Nothing additional.
Let's see, who's next? Police Chief Healy. Mr. Buchanan. Mr. Phillips.
I think it was handled excellently.
Mr. Brower. Mrs. Crane.
I just want to take a minute to thank Carol Bishop for a payroll. Approximately $10 million in funds that goes with the big stuff. I've only been here for a year and a half, so I've been with Carol for all that long. But since my second year, we've undergone the payroll system implementation and now talent implementation. It's been a lot. Carol worked for a lot of years, and I'm sure that's not what I'm doing back to. It's one of the bank or everything. So putting up selling a lot of things.
Thank you, Steve. I'd just like to make one comment in regards to Mark Matera. He has helped guide the ambulance authority through some struggled times, and hate to see him go. He's going to be missed. He's a longtime personal friend. But with that, we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
I guess everybody's in favor. Motion is.
Mark, you've been a great meeting.